Okay, the reason we're here today is to see a presentation from Tait Communications. And what I'm going to start with, my presentation for the first hour is all going to be based off of giving some context to why the city of Scappoose became involved in this project. The decision on the next radio system is the board of directors for the Columbia Niagara Communications District, and I'm going to go over the timeline and where they're at now with that. Can everybody hear me okay? I can use a microphone if needed. Okay, maybe that'll take care of it. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, Nancy, we'll see you today. Pictures of working here. Here we go. Okay, so first I'm going to cover the project history and go over what has transpired with this project. And then the background is that the current public safety radio system that's used by public safety agencies in Columbia County is over 20 years old. Typically, public safety radio systems are replaced about the 15, 20-year mark. So we're past due. So as this shows, in 2018, February 2018, Columbia 911 Communications District released a request for information. It wasn't an RFP, it was a request for information. Basically what that is reaching out to vendors saying what you generally offer in your company. It's not a tailored solution, it's not engineering specific to Columbia County and the needs of Columbia County. So in October 2018, about 8 months later, there was a presentation of RFIs. So some different vendors came out to Columbia County. They came to the Columbia Technology Center and they presented their proposals. About 29 months later, March 2021, C911, Columbia 911 Communications District hires a consultant to review the 4 RFIs that were submitted back in 2018. And I want to talk about what that consultant came back with here pretty soon, because that is kind of the catalyst for what the city's concern was, and I think you'll see why here in just a moment. February 2022, C911C's consultant returns to answer additional questions and present an updated estimate. So what you're looking at now is part of the presentation that the consultant that the 911 district hired presented. This is page 3 of their updated. So when they came back out the second time, they proposed new estimates, and this was the new updated estimates. So alternative number 3, which says PRESA, so that stands for Clark Regional Emergency Services Agency. That's Clark County 911 across the water in Washington. The 911 consultant recommended that this is what the county focus on. And also, there was a lot of push for alternative 4, which was going in the Washington County Consolidated Communication Agency system, which is the public safety radio system that serves Washington County and all first responders. So you'll see that I have number 1 here. You'll see that I have number 2 here. So this was our first insert, number 1. So this involves joining a much larger county's radio system. So they have a tax base that includes about 500,000 population, so much larger than what Columbia County has. They can afford to upgrade much sooner than we can. They can afford a lot more than we can. They have different needs than us, just because they have more public safety responders. So the first concern here was that we would be joining another entity's radio system and we wouldn't have any control over it, because they're going to do what they need to do for their community, for their taxpayers, and their first responders. And history shows that Clark County, Multnomah County, Washington County have all been about 10 to 15 years ahead of upgrading the radio systems ahead of Columbia County. So what does that mean? Well, the concern is that what happens when, say we join PRESA, Clark County, or we join Washington County system, what happens when they decide that they want to upgrade? Okay, they probably have the money to do that, but do we, Columbia County, have the money to do that to the tune of millions of dollars? That's what that traditionally costs. Probably not. So this would essentially be tethering us to whatever PRESA decides, or whatever Washington County decides, and what if we So that was a non-starter to me right there. We're going to put in a new system and it's going to cost millions of dollars and it doesn't address the coverage needs of our first responders? No. That's a hard no for me. So 60% for Cressa is what the coverage would be, 65%. And you'll notice this says in-building coverage. What's weird about this to me is that it doesn't show what the outside, when you're outdoors, what the coverage would be. Well, typically for 700 megahertz, which is what these systems are, the outdoor coverage, from what I've seen, is it follows the in-building coverage. So you're still probably going to be theoretically in the 60 to 65% coverage. So again, it's not a good scenario. Let's move to concern number 3. So Washington County is the option that I keep hearing over and over and over again. So I would say that is the one that is really being considered right now. And that is scary. So number 3 there, that is what I saw, and I got really concerned because 3 issues. We're going to tether ourselves to another agency and give them pretty much unilateral control over what we do here in Columbia County with our communication system. Hard no for me. And then number 2, we have the coverage issues. So you're already starting with coverage that doesn't meet standards. So that's a problem. And then $35 million over. Now you want to point this out. This is over 20 years. So this is the initial cost to build the system out, and then the recurring costs annually for maintenance and support and things like that. This is what the estimate was by the 911 consultant. So these are the 3 points of what got me and other city officials concerned. It didn't make sense. And there was no discussion that I heard of about an RFP or going out and talking to other vendors or anything like that. So let's move forward here. So let's talk about current events and how we got to where we're at right now. So March 2022, I was at IWC in Las Vegas. That's a big conference for wireless professionals. And I was introduced to some Tait communications representatives. I told them the story about what we were doing up here. And I got in contact with them. And then between March 2022 and May 2022, there was basically an opportunity, in summary, there was an opportunity presented where Tait offered to come do our engineering and give us an alternative proposal. Competition is good, right? So I said yes. I presented to the city manager, I presented to the city council. Competition is good because competition drives the price down and gives us what our taxpayers can potentially afford, or at least something better than what was presented for. At least that was the hope. So in October 2022, the city of Scappoose presents a date poll to schedule Tait's engineering. So some of you in this room received that poll, and y'all marked what day worked best for you, and it was the 29th, so here we are. And then December 1, 2022, Tait will actually be presenting again, and Motorola is going to present also, and that's going to be at the Columbia Technology Center on December 1st. So if you're interested in hearing Motorola's proposal and also hearing Tait's proposal again, or you have some follow-up questions, that meeting is also open to the public, and 911 is hosting that meeting. So what were the city's objectives in this whole project? Well, the main thing is to bring more information and options forward for everybody to consider. That was the main goal. We're not advocating for Tait, we're not advocating for Motorola, Harris, JVC, Kenwood, whatever. We're advocating to meet the public safety responders' needs for their safety and public safety at the lowest cost possible to our taxpayers. That is what our objective is, and that's what every elected official's objective that involved with this should be, in my opinion. So first, this is kind of how the project executed. First, we captured up-to-date need requirements of the end users, the first responders. So we went out and we interviewed nearly every single police chief, the sheriff, the fire department chiefs. We interviewed the school district superintendents. Well, here's the list. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself there. So we interviewed the sheriff and the police chiefs, our active police chiefs, 3 of the 5 fire district chiefs, county chiefs within Columbia County, plus one Westport Fire Rescue because they are also dispatched by the 911 district. We interviewed each of the school district superintendents. We interviewed each of the city managers, county department heads that had time to sit down with us, which was Public Works, Land Development, and General Services. Public Works directors, Class 9 PUD, and cities are putting all of their government service providers on the same consolidated system because they all have the same mission. They all have the same mission to deliver services to the public. So if you think about when Cascadia hits or any natural disaster, it's not just going to be the police department that's responding to the public's needs. It's not just going to be the fire department. It's going to be every city department working together. The school districts are going to come into play because they're going to act as a shelter. All of these are parts of the bigger, larger emergency system that need to be taken into consideration on a multi-million-dollar public safety radio system. And of course, you're going to hear me talk about enhancing school safety too throughout this presentation. And the takeaway is this is a really amazing opportunity for us to do some really great things. Enhancing school safety, we have an opportunity to do that. We have an opportunity to partner potentially with the County Broadband Initiative because a lot of those sites are going to need to be wireless. They're going to potentially need to use the same site. So there's all sorts of different, wins that could happen with this. So going back a slide here to my number 2, so based on the need requirements, the city's objectives was also to assist with designing a radio system that meets the requirements. That should always be step 1, right? Because first you need to establish what your user requirements are. If you're going to build a system that doesn't meet your end user requirements, then why are you doing it, right? So the first thing to do is to establish what is called your need requirements. And then 3 would be, this is obviously a very high-level summary, but 3 is to determine which vendor manufacturer can meet the need requirements at the lowest overall cost to the taxpayers. And I said that earlier. So first is establishing the need requirements of the public safety first responders need to be able to do their job and protect us. And then we need to figure out who can do that at the lowest cost. So let's talk about the survey results. So what I'm going to do here is, so you'll see I got survey results for basically all the different entities, but I'm just going to go over the law enforcement survey results and the fire district survey results because the law enforcement users typically need the most. They need coverage, they're dealing with fluid, active events. The fire district is a little bit different in that they usually travel for one person. They usually know what they're being dispatched to. As with law enforcement, the operations are very fluid, and split seconds can dictate everything. So law enforcement, as far as their coverage needs with portable radios, they're going to have the greatest needs there. So the first one that we pulled the users on, so these are, let me back up, sorry. So 1 through 17 here is what we pulled the law enforcement end users on. And we asked them to rate these things on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being least important, 0 being not important at all. 10 being very important, the most important. So what you see here on the right-hand side is a column, sorry, wrong button. So Columbia County Sheriff's Office is column 1, Rainier PD, Columbia City PD, St. Helens PD, Vernonia PD, Scottsdale PD. So number 1 is reliable portable radio coverage outdoors. So that's things like roads, parking lots, just basically outdoors. Number 2 is reliable portable radio coverage indoors and inside buildings. Emergencies happen inside buildings, so that's a given. They need coverage inside buildings as well. And number 3 is portable radio coverage from the hip. So this is kind of, let me explain this a little bit because this could be a little confusing. So fire and some other users will, sorry. Okay, so portable radio from the hip, why is that important? Because when end users, the first responders, have the radio down here versus up here, it actually changes the coverage quite a bit. And if I remember correctly, I think the here is the Bible of the engineers for radio communications as well. What was it, 12? Is it a 12 dB loss or portable? ahead. Do you remember?
Please repeat that.
Okay, thanks, Rick. So basically what that means is that a first responder holding and talking to the radio like this versus a down on a hip, which is how first responders actually use their radios, is a APT loss. So when they map the coverage, which we'll see later, they have to use those loss factors to determine if the first responders are actually going to have coverage the way they actually use their radios. So it's important, it's an engineering consideration. If you don't take those things into consideration, then first responders are going to wonder, well, how come I can't use my radio down here where I actually wear my radio versus up here? And if you think about the importance of that, well, let's think about the importance of that. So if a law enforcement officer does a traffic stop, let's say, and the driver comes out shooting, they're not going to be able to take the radio out and hold it like this and call for cover. They're going to use their mic that they have up here, or they're going to hit their emergency button that's down here. So the radio has to be able to send and receive from down here. So that's the importance of that. And you can see that every single law enforcement representative that was interviewed, you can see they all rated these things as critically important. Location services, reliable portable radio coverage at least 10 miles in neighboring counties. That's because incidents often travel outside our county borders. Some things start inside the county borders lines and they travel outside. The most recent one that comes to mind is there was a kidnapping suspect that came over the bridge from Longview. They went north on 30, and that incident ended up traveling well into Clatsop County. And it had, of course, our first responders engaged in it, and they needed to be able to give reliable updates to dispatch and other units. Location services, APL for mobiles and portables. So this is a thing that's been around now for over 10 years, and it's really important. And the reason is because, especially for our county deputies that work out in the county, they don't typically have cover. And so for the dispatcher and other units to be able to see where they're at in case there's an emergency and they can't call for help, whenever they're not responding to a status check and they know that they're out with a suspect or whatever, they can see exactly where they're at. And it maps on the dispatcher's map that they have there. And so again, these are standard features that have been in play a long time. And I have a story to tell to kind of illustrate the importance of that. So years ago, I was born and raised here, but I lived in Seattle for 6 years, and I worked at the Harvard Medical Center for the Department of Public Safety. And we interacted a lot with the Seattle PD. We had County Hospital, Level 1 Trauma Center. We had King County Jail come in. We dealt with at-risk all the time. Fought with people all day long. It was quite a job. Seattle PD on Halloween his name was Tim Britton, and he was on Yesler at about 14th, and a guy by the name of Tim Longford opened fire on him using a 223 rifle. He had a trainee. Tim was hit by those rounds and pretty much dead right there. And his trainee was she was so stressed out, I'm not going to put her term, that's not the right word, but she was not able to tell the dispatcher other units where they were at. And thankfully, Seattle PD, even 10, 15 years ago, had this technology in the radio system, and the dispatcher immediately got on the air within seconds and said, I mapped whatever the unit number is at 14th and yes. Within seconds, they had first respond other officers go into application. Without that technology, who knows how long it would have taken them to find her, and she was critically injured too. But it also helped locate the suspect because as incoming SPD cars were going into the location, their dash cam cameras actually caught the suspect vehicle leaving the location. So if you think about it, if that would have been delayed anymore, they would have missed that critical piece of information. And that was the only way that they were able to ID the suspect vehicle. And that led to weeks, if I remember correctly, of trying to locate that vehicle. But that's just a story, one story, to illustrate how important the APL location services are for us to have in a new radio system for the safety of our first responders. PTT identification on all radios for all transmissions, so that just means that the dispatcher can always see who's talking on the radio. The little thing that is a caller ID pops up on their screen. Emergency buttons, so that's just making sure those little orange buttons on top of the radios are enabled and active. And so if the first responder gets, let's say they've been shot in a way that, or injured in a way that they can't speak, they can hit their button and they can get across that emergency arrest signal. And with that ABL feature too, the dispatcher automatically knows where they're at too. So those two can work side by side. So encryption, that just means that just can't hear it. So a lot of people like to hear that, right? So there's a lot of people with scanners. The problem is that it becomes a safety issue for the officers. People that want to do bad things to officers, first responders, know where they're at. Today is actually the anniversary of the 4 Lakewood police officers that were shot and killed in a coffee shop. I think that was 10 or 15 years ago, and a guy just walked in and shot them both in the head. So if the bad people know where the first responders are at because they say over the radio where they're at on lunch, things like that, traditionally, that's probably not a good thing. So this gives us an opportunity to make the first responder safety, and this is a standard feature that none of this stuff is things that other jurisdictions aren't doing across the nation. These are all standard things that city and county governments across the United States are doing. What we're talking about here is nothing that's unordinary. The other thing that I have a concern with too as a city councilor is, we're unable to provide 24/7 police coverage right now. So the bad guys know where our people, one officer is, so they can go commit crime, on the other side of the city. They know when they go off duty or could know. They know when they come on. And so all of those things, if you have encrypted radio traffic, are prevented. So designed for resiliency to withstand severe adverse conditions. So that's things like Cascadia. We know that's coming when, who knows. But the whole point is that when Cascadia or another natural type disaster wipes out our landlines and our cell phones aren't going to work either. We definitely need our public safety radio system to work because that's how people are going to get help. If the public safety radio system doesn't work because Cascadia takes it out, can you imagine what would happen? Fire department wouldn't be able to be dispatched, so hypothetically the phones will be out, cell phones will be out. Unless we have pigeons, how are they going to get the message to go where they need to go? They won't. So it's very important that whatever we do is built to withstand those types of events. So what exactly does that mean? That means that there's generators there, and there already are, but there's generators there that are bolted to foundation. The towers are designed, they're engineered to withstand a Cascadia type event. Things are mounted on the tower the way that they're going to be able to withstand a shake of that size. So those are all examples of what resiliency means. Emergency ops incident command talk groups for each city in the county. So that concept is that if there is a natural disaster, that each city in the county is able to have talk groups. Think of talk groups as channels, so that they can all go to those talk groups and work in the area that they're working. So maybe, let's say that there's a variety of different folks that are working in South Scavengers. They would be able to switch over to a channel that is designed for everybody working in that area. And these types of things, like added talk groups, don't really make the system go up in price at all because the capacity is already there. They're just thinking of them as virtual channels. Ability to communicate on the system with public works, schools, and electric providers. So you can see there also that the first responders, the chiefs that were interviewed, and the sheriff, all gave that attendance critically important. There's nothing in the 186-page consultant report from 911 that I saw that addresses any of that. So that was a concern too, because I'm going to step back here, because again, this is a really great opportunity to do a lot of great things to increase safety in our schools, get everybody on the same system so we can all efficiently serve the public. We don't have these isolated radio systems. Because all of these different disciplines have the need to communicate. And so they all have these separate communication systems. So it makes more sense if everybody's on one system and they can all communicate with one another for interoperability purposes. And again, that's a national trend. This isn't anything new. Ability to seamlessly communicate with OSB, Concept, Calix, Longview, they need to be able to communicate. So obviously those are all 10s as well. Talk group means they just evaluated the talk group list, those again are on virtual channels, smartphone applications. So that came up as a very important for Columbia County because we don't always have supervisors on duty. In bigger departments, they have the luxury of sergeants, first-line supervisors on duty for law enforcement. And the significance of that is there's things like pursuits, high-risk incidents that often require a supervisor to monitor and make decisions about the way that event is going to unfold on the law enforcement side. So what this means is that a supervisor, a law enforcement supervisor from any agency, can be anywhere with their cellular phone coverage, and they have an app on their phone. And that app allows them direct communication with the system to be able to talk and listen on their smartphone, no matter where they're at, so long as they have LTE coverage or 5G coverage. And so these are all things that are really common in public safety radio systems now. None of this is anything that is out of the ordinary for these types of public safety radio systems. Capture portable radios checked out during training events and events, incidents, and SAR. So the concept behind that is that we thought that it would be a better use of taxpayer money if there was a cache of radios that could be checked out or stored at a central location. Because otherwise, you have each individual agency having this cache of radios for like search and rescue things that may happen, a half dozen to a dozen times a year. And so is that a really good use when these radios are so expensive? No, probably not. It makes more sense to have a cache of them that different agencies can check out if they're actually needed. And then that, of course, reduces the overall quantity that needs to be purchased, thus saving the taxpayers money. And the very last one is, so a lot of these things, I want to point out that a lot of these things make sense to the first responders in the room and the public. I'm so glad that we have so many public in attendance. But some of this is probably a foreign talk, but I just want to point out that the first responders in the room, this definitely resonates with them. So data radio channel for mobile computer data. So what that is the first responders have their computers in their cars. There has to be a connection in between that computer and the dispatch center to be able to get the data back and forth. That connection method, called typically referred to as a carrier, has to have connectivity into our county. Well, it used to be that we had that connectivity through the radio system, but things became outdated and unsupported, and they yanked that. And then they said, okay, everybody has to go to cellular to be able to use their computers in their car. Okay, well, so that's like $50 a computer per month because you're paying Verizon or AT&T, so there's that. But also, once you get to, a mile to the west of Highway 30, you don't have cellular phone coverage most of the time. So then they don't have connectivity. So what's the importance of that? Well, I can tell you, from being a reserve deputy years ago, that when I would replace the cars, I was able to find a lot more on some people. And if I didn't have a connection to be able to do that, all those people would have been arrested and went to jail. So the connectivity is really important because they can run plates, they can run people, they can get premise history. That means if they're going to a location that has some sort of warning flags on them, hazards, the officers, they can see that all on their computer. So it's really important that the first responders get that connectivity back so that they have coverage throughout the county, even when they don't have cellular phone reception to provide that connectivity. So I won't go over all of this, and these survey results are all in the handouts that either you have or you can get from the back table there. But you can see the fire district survey results are almost the same as law enforcement as far as the categories go. The ratings are different. But all, just in the interest of not having to talk more, I will forgo going over this. So I'll just briefly summarize these or just touch on them. So city and county public works departments were also interviewed, so you can see their county public works, Classified Public Works, Rainier Public Works, Columbia City Public Works, St. Paul's Public Works, Philadelphia Public Works, Gavin's Public Works, and then other county departments. So why is this an issue, other county departments? So the assessor's office and land development go out into the field and they have some job duties that are, some people aren't always thrilled to see them, let's put it that way, and they care for their safety. And so they need the ability, what was relayed to me for these interviews was they need the ability to call for help if they need help, because again, cell phones don't work in a lot of places they go. And so this is also an opportunity to increase the worker safety, the county worker, the surveyors, I'm sorry, I can't think of all the different classifications of all of these, but I think you get the point is that they're out there doing a job that can sometimes be dangerous and they have no ability to call for help. So this also increases worker safety, and it's on the same rate safety further in the presentation. Electric utility providers. Okay, so why would we want electricity service providers on the radio system? Well, again, if you look at the whole circle of public safety response, they're included sometimes because fire will respond and if the wall set down, energized line, they can't touch it until unless something's changed. Josh, if I'm not correct now, but last I knew, fire would touch it unless it was de-energized. And so what does that do? Well, that creates a problem. Let's say the emergency is on the other side of the power line. That was the problem. And then Mike Sykes was actually going to be here. Did Mike show up? I don't think he did. Mike Sykes. I'm sorry. Okay. So Mike was going to give a little speech here at the end of this about how important it is for the utility providers to be on the radio system and be able to communicate with the fire districts. Do you want to say anything about why you guys need that communication or how it would be helpful? Or
I think first thing comes to mind, if, let's say there's a car in the hole and there's a wire laying on the car, we're going to try to respond to that as fast as we can.
So Mike had mentioned something about the wildland fire season and the ability to, I didn't understand it. Do you know what that was about, how the ability to communicate with the fire districts during the increased fire season?
I think that was along the lines of, if we have wires down and have to respond to fires, being able to talk to us and so we can let them know that that's going to be and safe for them.
Thanks.
I believe that's what happened.
That rings a bell. Thanks. Sorry to finish on the spot there.
No.
Okay, and also during the interviews, the surveys with the different agencies, we actually got all the counts of the equipment that they needed, and this of course helps with the budgetary process. Okay, so let's talk about funding considerations. So there's basically two options, right? There's a bond, and then there's a levy. So bonds can be used legally for things like initial capital purchase, so to build out the system. They cannot be used for recurring costs, so support, maintenance, things like that. They can't be used for that. So that means that a levy would probably be needed. And the problem that you get into with levies, not bonds don't count towards compression, levies do, is that once you reach the $10 mark, you start to compress all of the other local option levies. So all of those levies that y'all voted for to fund, say, the sheriff's office, the jail, the fire district, if they're a local option levy and not a permanent, they get pushed down because we're in sitting ahead to the bottom here, parts of Vernonia, Clastonite, Rainier are already in compression. So what does that mean? Well, if you pass another levy, or you increase the rate of an existing levy, it's going to push the funding down that those current levies give to the folks that need them to operate the jail, to operate any other local option levy. So the whole point here is that whatever system is chosen, you want to be really cognizant about the levy part of it. It'll make more sense in a minute, but basically you don't want another high cost levy because it's going to compress the other levies. And so Scappoose is at about 46 cents away from compression, and St. Helens is the furthest away from compression. And I emailed the county assessor's office to get this information back in September. And this is the email that I received from the assessor's office. And again, if you have the handout, it is in there. Okay, so continuing with funding considerations, so example of how we can avoid further compression. So you'll remember earlier when we started the presentation, we talked about going to the Washington County system. And the problem with that is, in my opinion, is that Washington County is going to charge like a cellular phone provider. They're going to charge, and these are the rates that they had in their consultants report from last year. So per radio per year, Washington County is going to charge Columbia County $431, like a cell phone company. So those are annual fees. So those would have We saw the quantities of radios earlier, and just for law enforcement and fire district users alone, just their radios, we're not talking about school district, public works, or anything like that. That comes to about $342,000 a year that we would be paying Washington County just to use their backbone, just to use their resolving core. So that to me doesn't make sense, and I'll explain why here. If we can buy our, let's put it this way, if we can buy our own core, and we can pay for our own core in 3 to 6 years, and these systems last 15 to 20 years, why would we want to go use Washington County's core and pay $342,000? We would literally be $3 or $4 million in overpaying over 15 to 20 years by partnering with Washington County and paying their subscriber fees. That doesn't make any sense. And then you get into the issue of the levy compression, further illustrates it just doesn't make sense. So I point this out because this is a consideration that's on the table for the 9 local right now. There's no indication that they're going to do this, but this is an option that is being considered, and it is being talked about in just about every single meeting. So the other aspect of the funding that I want to bring forward too is alternative funding sources. So I talked about having schools, public works, electric utility providers on the system for their needs and for enhancing safety. But what else could that do? Well, what else it could do is allow us to qualify for grants. So if there's a school safety grant, well, we're probably not going to qualify for a school safety grant unless the schools are somehow on the system and benefiting, there's a school safety component to it. So not only do we give the schools radios to be safer, but we can also qualify for grants that could, and the benefit of that, and that funding source, could be more significant than just having the radios every day in case something happens. So there's a component to having these different entities on the system. One is they need to all be on the same system so they can communicate, but number 2 is being able to qualify for any available grants too. And it's my hope that the 911 district will hire a consultant to help look for grants and look for any alternative funding before going out to the public and wanting the public to, or taxpayers, to put the bill with this. There's also the county broadband project that's going on. So broadband's a really big thing, and there's a lot of funding for it, and there's more funding coming for it is what the rumor is. Well, this could be another opportunity to partner with the county on the broadband project because in the rural areas, broadband is probably going to be overhead, meaning it's going to be wireless. It's not going to be fiber in the ground because that's going to cost so much money. It'll probably be a combination of both throughout the county. But anyway, the point here is that if we can also include the county broadband project in some capacity on this, and in doing so, be able to leverage funding or grants or whatever for the build out of some of these tower sites, that could potentially save millions of dollars too. All right, on my last slide here, and I just want to play a video, a couple videos that kind of resonate with the school safety piece of this.
Vista schools have been making their buildings and classrooms.
Isaac, any ideas?
You got to mute your computer.
Vista schools have been making their buildings and classrooms safer for kids for several years now. And today, we have an inside look at a new system that would lead to faster response time in an emergency. Good evening, I'm Craig McGrath.
And I'm Jennifer Griswold. The staffer needs to just touch one button to get police to respond to the school. Reporter John Kipper has the details.
The direct line between the Starving County 911 Center and all of Vista schools should allow police to respond to an emergency faster, while also hopefully giving them a better handle on what's going on.
If there is an emergency situation, we know seconds matter. And that because those cell phones have a tendency to jam up towers in the area, making it impossible for administrators to use the phones.
Staff members at Carriage Hill Elementary held countless drills on emergency situations today.
And this one here.
It's being called the fire alarm for police. The multi-agency radio communication system, or MARCS, is used by law enforcement throughout the state. Now there's the MARCS in School radio.
School district would simply press the alert button, and instantaneously all the first responders that were set up to receive that signal would receive the alert that you heard.
The system doesn't rely on phone lines, cell towers, and works without power. If there's a threat at a school, 911 dispatchers are inundated with phone calls. This eliminates that problem.
When an incident occurs, that those phone calls start stacking up. And then as they take those phone calls, they try to triage to see what the situation is. What occurs with this is there is no phone call, there's no lag time.
The radio works similar to a silent alarm in a bank. Shooter in a school would never know. Police were notified. The user does not even have to talk to use the system.
A responder can actually monitor what's going on in the room if they need to through the microphone without giving away any information to the attack mode.
Grant money from the Ohio School Facilities Commission will pay to put one radio in every school building. So far, over 1,100 districts have jumped on board. The Groveport Madison Schools deals with 2 different police departments. They say the MARCS will help.
You know, sometimes it's hard to coordinate with the police departments and so forth. So we were very excited that we're going to get an instrument that will be able to call in and get right to the police station when we have a major emergency.
Groveport is currently learning how to use the system and should have it in place by early next year. In Groveport, Steve Wakeford, NBC4.
All right, I think those videos capture the school, the ability to, or the opportunity to enhance school safety pretty well. Those videos, I think, are a couple of years old as well. Next, so Mike Sykes is going to be here to talk about the Clear River QD and the electric utility provider component. But unfortunately, that's I've asked Sheriff Dixley, if you would mind just giving a brief, just couple-minute testimonial on the officer safety considerations for law enforcement in this radio system. And did Bob, I see back there, calling you guys. Sheriff Dixley, are you still allowed to come up and give a minute?
I don't need to come up, but I can talk. So first I want to thank you all for coming. So many people being here really, to me, shows that you guys care about the first responders in Columbia County, so that's great. Our radio system has been outdated for quite some time. Over the past 5 years, my deputies have noticed a degradation in the radio system when you get up in the hills out in the county. And that puts not only my employees' lives at risk, but it puts all of your lives at risk in the end. That has nothing, there's no fault in that with the current 911 system. This project has been kicked down the road so many times. It's just a matter of finally picking up the ball and doing something with it. I don't have the knowledge of this. I don't know how radios work, frankly. I don't care. When I push the button to talk, I want someone else to be able to hear me and answer me back. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. And I want that coverage to be reliable and at the best possible price for all of you. And that's what matters to me. I was recently this year, I was involved in a critical incident, and the radio systems really failed. And it's unfortunate, but that's kind of where we're at. And that's why we're coming together as a group to try to make sure that we get this thing done and this thing done right. So I want to thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate it. Mohammed from Salem Public Works, do you want to give a little more about the Public Works piece too?
I feel that everybody's starting to have neck issues, so it's going to be good. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mohammed. I'm the Public Works Director of Public Safety Technology. I know a few folks, nice to see you. So yeah, we also share the same exact concern about this radio system. Right? From Public Works standpoint, it's really essential throughout, not necessarily just natural disasters, but even everyday winter storm challenges, road closures, accidents. Radio communication is really essential, right? We want a reliable system But most importantly, so if any of you is a member of the APWA, the American Public Works Association, public works across the United States now have been designated as emergency responders. There are 2 states in the United States that officially adopted them as official responders, and it's making its way to the entire place. So, and they are just the organization signing agreement with FEMA, basically to also work on the designation, that integration between all agencies such as police, fire, etc. So going back to the point that radio communication is really critical, it will be very important to have a reliable system, number one, something that can work when you need it, not when you don't want it. So I think that's pretty much it from our standpoint. If you have any questions.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right, that is the end of just kind of bringing everybody up to speed on the context of where the project was and currently is. And at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Tait to present their engineering and their proposal that the city's been working on with them over the last several months.
Hey, Tyler, do we want to take a couple-minute break? Let everybody grab some coffee?
Yes, thank you for reminding that. Let's, yeah, I think we can 10-minute break. There's one piece up right now, 2:10.
All right, so I guess we should go ahead and get started. And I think there's still a few people that are coming back in, but we can start with a little introduction. Tyler, thank you for the presentation. Will Mullins will take communications, and I'll talk a little bit about our design practices, as well as bring up our team members here to introduce themselves and go through our engineering design, cost estimates, and some of the information that we use to put together this proposal. Mr. Kevin Summerall here is the president of Tait Communications. Kevin, if you wanted to just give a real quick introduction.
Yeah, thank you again for having us here today. Obviously, this is important to you, whether you're going to be part of the first responding community or the residents of Columbia County. It's, you know, we take this very seriously, and I come here because I like to participate in this activity. Right? It's important to you, it's important to us. So hopefully we'll convey that to you today. But I'm here to make a commitment to you as a community that as a company, we take this seriously and we put the entire force of our resources behind making this a successful project.
And Mr. Raymond Hafizi is our senior solutions engineer.
I've been with Tait for over 7 years now. Been in the radio industry for about 20 years total. So a lot to overcome. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your time. Appreciate how busy your day-to-day lives are. Cheers.
All right, my name is Will Mullins, and I'm the business development manager here at Tait Communications. My background, I've been in the radio communications LMR industry for going on 20 years now. I started in federal space and went on into public safety. Most recently, prior to Tait Communications, I was the technology director at the Deschutes County 911. So I'm very familiar with where it is, Columbia County, as well as the operations here in the state. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and jump in. I'm going to ask Kevin if he would just come up and kind of tell everyone a little bit about Tait Communications and our background, and then we'll get into some more technical discussions.
Thank you. I'm going to try not to read the slides to you. I would insult your intelligence. So kind of just praise speak here a little bit. So, you know, there's a couple of things to think about when, you know, we look at communities and the way that communities do business. So Tait's a 50-year-old company that has done nothing. You know, I heard my peers here talk about their history. I built my first heat kit radio in 1970. So it gives you an idea of those of you that remember heat kits, right? Probably share the same gray hair I do. But so I've been doing radio and voice communications for a long time. And it's been important to me. I carried a radio as part of my military career, and I've been in financial traders. Those guys always look at themselves as they were the hardest people to deal with. So, but to me, and to Tait as a company, public safety is the most important. One of the things I'll share with you is we just won one of the largest P25 Phase 2 radio systems in the world. It'll be a 450 site system covering the entire country. So it gives you an idea that we've been doing this a long time. I mean, do this, but it's personal to us. One of the differences between us and some of our competitors I'll share with you is that we're not a publicly owned company, we're a private company. We're a charitable trust company, so we can't be sold or acquired by somebody without government approval. We're owned by an organization in New Zealand, so our parent company is based out of New Zealand, not the Americans. But that's important because we are a complete turnkey company. We do everything. We do design, we do engineering, we do manufacturing, and we do support. We don't outsource any of that. So again, it's not just about the company and what comes from behind the company. If there's a problem, we address it because it's our reputation, it's your reputation, and that's why I come and it's important for you to be here. And when you look at some of the ways that when we look at being a private company versus being a public company, we answer to you as a customer. That's the only thing we answer to. We don't have public stockholders. We haven't done 17 acquisitions in the last 5 years and start smashing all this stuff together and try to figure out how to make it work. What we do is radio infrastructure, radio systems. That's all we focus on, what's important to you and how you communicate. And then the other model that we look at is we believe in freedom of choice, and you'll hear this throughout the discussion today, open standards. What do I mean by open standards? When you look at P25, it's a standard. When you look at the way radios communicate over the network, it's a standard. The differences are, we're not going to tell you what you have to buy. And I always say there's two different ways to look at things. One is flag paper, and the other is painting. Very unique, right? Flag paper, when the flag gets stuck, he's stuck. Can't get unstuck. Can't get out. You get wrapped around that flag paper, and you're going to be stuck in that flag paper. That's one model. And if you really take that to the next level, you're going to constantly be trying and fighting to do something different, to get yourself unstuck, but you're going to be stuck. The other model is to look at it as a painting. You have the freedom of choice to paint the picture you need to paint that serves your community. That is the choice of radios, the choice of console systems. How are you going to communicate? Which group is going to use which radio technology? Not everybody has to have the same level and scale of radio, but you pick those radios as an organization. The benefit of having that type of open standard environment is competition. The more competition you have, the more people that can offer products on that radio system, the better it is in the long term for you, because you're going to get the best price based on competition. It's not a one size, that's what you get deal. And that's where we're a little bit different, because we believe in open standards. We use that infrastructure to be able to say, look, we're going to provide you the backbone. You can buy Tait radios and put them on a Tait infrastructure. You can buy Motorola radios, put them on a Tait infrastructure. Buy Harris radios, buy Kenwood radios. That's your choice, not my choice. You won't hear that through a lot of these other organizations. That just doesn't happen. They want you to buy them. And that flag paper model becomes, let me ask you this, anybody lease a car? It's easy to lease a car. Now let's also assume that you had that lease, and that bank or dealership got to raise the price at their will, not yours. And let's say that you committed to a 20-year lease, and that rate went up. It's almost like having a variable rate loan over the course of your mortgage. You don't have any control of that. That's what happens when you start looking at some of these shared systems, some of these county-wide systems. You lose control of it. You have absolutely no say over the price. You have no say over the features. As things get added to them, we want them. Pay for it. You need that? Pay for it. Something's going to change, you got to pay for it. What we'll offer is transparency. We'll basically provide you with a system that you own. I guarantee you the total cost of ownership over that same 20 years is probably going to be close to half of what you're being shown today, because you don't have all of that recurring, layered on approach to the way you look at it. As I said, when we look at the commitment to listen, we engage our customers. I'm here because I want to hear what you have to say. I want to understand your questions. I want to understand how we can serve you as a community. And that's my commitment to you, being here to help serve you as a community and to meet your needs. Our commitment to deliver. When we commit to do transparent on how we do it, what we do, all through the process, whether it's project management, partnering with you to deploy a system, rolling things out. It's all about how we communicate with you. You'll see more of us than you probably ever want. But again, it's important to us because it's our reputation and it's also your reputation. We want it to be successful. And then it's the courage to act. And that is when it's not a perfect world, we're not perfect people, things go wrong, stuff happens. It's how you address the problems. It's how you deal with the shortcomings. It's how you're willing to step up and say, you know what, I own that. We'll deal with it. We'll fix it. It's important that you understand our commitment to you, and then again, why it's important for me to be here. So, you know, as a company, I can sit up and tell you how many years of this we've done and how many things we've done. You know, we have systems all over this area. How many people have electric in their house? Right? So Portland General is one of our customers. Bonneville Power, the largest federal transmission operator just north of here, is one of our P25 customers. The little train that are running around here, TriMet, P25 Phase 1 system going to P25 Phase 2. Let's see, Puget Sound, just north. You know, when you look around this area, any of the power, I know Idaho Power provides some power into Oregon as well. Idaho Power is one of our customers. Pacific River is another one of our Tait infrastructure customers. Northwest Natural Gas provider in the region is another one of our customers. So we're a lot closer to you than you actually are probably aware of. All of their voice communication, we talk about the criticality of radio systems in the utility space. Think of that guy standing out there in the rain, in the pouring rain during a storm that has to fix that power line. If he's not talking to somebody during that entire process, he may not be getting shot, but he's going to get fried pretty quick. They have to coordinate a lot of things to make sure that that individual who's sitting in that bucket truck, who's dealing with high voltage power, isn't going to get killed. And that's all done via radio. So it's very similar to what we do in every aspect of it. It's important to us. All right. So again, you have my commitment that as a company, I will be here, we will be here, and we'll continue to support you, not only through this process, but beyond. So again, thank you for your time. I know everybody's got a lot to do, but we appreciate you having us here. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. All right, so if you're going to hear a lot of buzzwords throughout this presentation, and also I don't like to talk too much, so if you can talk with me, that'd be a lot better. If you have questions, what something means, feel free to ask, and we'll help to address it as much as possible. So when we talk about radio communication, there's kind of two aspects of it. There's infrastructure, and then there's subscriber devices or unit devices. No different than your cell phones. Everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket, and that cell phone is one piece of the network. You have to be able to hit a tower somewhere that will distribute your call to California or Florida or whoever it is that you're calling to. So there's the two pieces. The infrastructure, that's the tower sites, all of the back office equipment that typically doesn't get thought about. And then there's the subscriber devices with the handheld radio that users use. The majority of this discussion is going to be around the infrastructure. We'll talk a little bit about those subscriber devices or those user devices, but the majority of it is on the infrastructure side. So with that, just inherent, it's going to be a fairly technical conversation. So as we go through it, ask questions, we can interact and we'll address a lot of the questions that come up. P25 is a pretty big buzzword. Does everyone in here know what P25 is? All right, I'll define it if you don't. P25 is Project 25. Project 25 is a protocol standard that was defined by APCO, which is a public safety communications organization nationwide, specifically to address the lack of interoperability between disparate communication systems. So the concept or the ideal behind P25 was to create a basis or a standard that all manufacturers were designed to, so that it doesn't matter if you have a Motorola radio or a Kenwood radio or a BK Realm radio, all of those radios will be able to communicate together on an infrastructure level. Just like your cell phones, Samsung or an iPhone or a Pixel, it doesn't matter. You're able to call anyone and you wouldn't know the difference as to what phone they're talking on the other, unless you're an iPhone user and you're text messaging and then you get the dreaded green text. So That's what P25 is. It's a standard. So we talked a lot about P25 throughout our presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead a couple slides here. And within that, the idea is interoperability. Interoperable communications. Tyler, when he was up here talking, highlighted that. Mohammed highlighted it again when he was talking from the public works perspective. The interoperability to communicate across the board, whether that's police to police, police to fire, fire to wildland, or USFS, or BLM, or whomever is involved in whatever situation, that ability to communicate interoperably is extremely important. So all of our discussion is going to be around P25 or Project 25. Now, part of the P25 standards is, I would say it's a standard is a very loose term of what it is. It's a basis that everyone is supposed to design to for minimal acceptable use. So a lot of manufacturers' radios operate at slightly different levels, which will affect your coverage, which is important when we go through the coverage aspect, we'll talk about that, and the capabilities of that device itself. When we designed our system, and this is a Tait standard, we designed specifically to the published standard that is in TSB 88, which if you look that up, it is a document of solution to the P25 protocol, specifically regarding coverage and how coverage should work as far as loss factors, for in-building penetration, other examples there. So now we'll jump on into the presentation. So please ask questions as we go through. Let's make it interactive. Tait is an LMR OEM, an original equipment manufacturer specifically for land mobile radio devices. It's portable radios, mobile radios, infrastructure, tower equipment. That is our bread and butter. That's what we focus on. That being said, that's only one piece of an overall inclusive unified communications platform. So we leverage our partners. So we set up an entire partner ecosystem, which is bleeding out a little bit, but an entire ecosystem to where rather than us trying to figure out how to do something that someone else already does, with the minimal time that we want to devote to that, away from our bread and butter or focus, we partner. So we look across the board for the best of breed solutions and partner with them. That way we can have a solution, an entire solution portfolio to offer to our users. So this is just an example of some of the partners that we partner with. Out of that partnership perspective, we want to make sure that every one of our partners designs to a minimum threshold to keep standardization across the board. Again, we're talking about P25 in this conversation, so I'm going to highlight a couple of the P25 manufacturers that we actually partner with. For our dispatch console solution, in the Tait offering, we actually included 2 different manufacturers you can choose from because the 911 dispatch will tell you it's more about the use and feel and capability that they have in place than what it is the ergonomics or anything else that someone else is looking at. So what's important to them is going to be different than what's important to a deputy that's on patrol or a firefighter that's going into a structure fire. So those differences are important. So we partner with Tait, Intertalk, and Citron as our P25 console manufacturers. In this proposal, we actually included an option for Tait Scout consoles, P25 consoles, or the Intertalk ECS console system. I'm going to touch on one more thing. So we're talking about that P25 and the standardization of the protocol. CSSI is the definition of that protocol path to the console manufacturers from that mobile radio. CSSI stands for Console Subsystem Interface. All it is a translation server. It's a translator, 2 servers, one that sits on, we'll use Tait as an example, one that sits on the Tait side, and then one sits on the Tait side. And then what they do is they talk to each other to map or translate the communications from the radio system to the dispatch and vice versa. That's all CSSI is a translation server. ISSI is an inter-subsystem interface. It's the exact same thing. It's a translation server. Now, ISSI is important because that is your P25 link to interoperable communications with other P25 systems. So we talked about CRESA, we talked about WACA, the Washington County system, SRB, or the State Radio Project for ODOT, which OSP and ODOT operate on. That's another P25 system. So since those are P25 systems, they've got the capability of interoperable communications based on the standard. So that's where CSSI and ISSI come into play. So included in the Tait offering is an ISSI solution that will enable a connection from let's say Columbia County for School with the Tait P25 system. It will enable connection from Columbia County to be connected into the state. What that means is that the user can drive from St. Helens all the way to Bend or all the way down to Eugene and have seamless communications all the way back because they're able to leverage the P25 infrastructure that the state has. Technically, it's feasible. Of course, you actually have to do an intergovernmental agreement with the Department of Transportation in order to foster that. But as far as the technical functionality, you will have that based into the system, and that's actually costly. Now, this is important too because the different manufacturers do different things with their ISSI. All it is translating, right? Just the translation server. How expensive are translation servers? No, they shouldn't be all that expensive. Prices range anywhere from $200,000 up to $2 million is what I've seen for a single translation server. $2 million seems extremely high to me personally, especially when the list price for ours is $200,000 flat. So that'll give you a little perspective. As you're looking at that interoperable communications where somebody talks and highlights that capability, it's very important to ask about the price tag that's associated with that capability because different manufacturers charge extremely different prices. All right, so we're going to go in and start talking about the technical solution. This is where it's going to get a little bit over my head. So I'm going to bring Mr. Raymond up to talk about it. I'll start talking as he's walking up and talk a little bit about our design criteria and what we focus on. So Tyler walked through the survey. The survey is great information, and it gave us the opportunity to say, okay, what is important to every single user? When we're making design, it's like a Rubik's Cube. Every time you turn this dial, it changes other things over here. It's not a linear change. So then you have to go to a system. So the more data that we have present, the more information that's provided to us, we'll know how to twist those dials and how to design the best overall solution to maximize the benefit of all users. In our design, we focus on public safety as the primary use case. So that's law enforcement as well as fire, EMS, etc. And then we also said, okay, now let's add in an additional layer to offer the county the ability to expand beyond just the public safety user group. And like Tyler was saying, that opens up benefits for grant funding. And there's a horrible event that happened in Uvalde, Texas last year. Part of that event that unfolded is a lot of financial means being provided from the federal government now to foster and improve security within the school systems. So that's another financial mechanism that's there for the county to leverage to provide that communication platform, that interoperable communication, that security, that peace of mind, not only to the first responders and constituents associated with that, but also to the school boards. And then electric utilities also opens up another aspect. As Mohammed mentioned, no, it wasn't Mohammed, it was, I didn't catch your name. Kurt. Yep. Okay, you had mentioned about the establishment of first responders or giving that designation, or maybe that wasn't one, that designation across the board to electric utilities, the critical infrastructure aspect. I believe now that that's an important thing. Dispatchers have been fighting for that for years as well. But having that designation means that you own critical infrastructure, which means that you now get federal funding. The critical infrastructure aspect is very important. The designation, while it doesn't seem like a big deal, it opens up another revenue stream, another funding stream to help pay for some of the solutions. So as we were capturing all of this data and using it for our design, we focused on coverage as a primary concern, how to maximize that coverage, how to provide interoperable communications, not only for the users within this system, but also to users that are going to be mutual aid users, summertime, wildland fires concern, hospital routes, school usage, school security, all of those pieces we factored in for interoperable communications. So coverage, interoperable communications were the key aspects that we were looking at when we were designing the system. And then cost being the last or the third of those solutions. So when we factored decision making on our design, it went in that order. So what we came up to as the final design configuration for the P25 system is a 14-site hybrid P25 system design. And when I say hybrid, it's not multi-band, it's multi-configuration. So it's an entire 700-800 megahertz solution. It's 14 sites across the country. Now the hybrid aspect means that along Highway 30 and in the populated density areas, it is a simulcast solution. In the more rural areas or western part of the county, it is a multicast solution. So simulcast, what that is, I'll define it real quick and then Ray, I'll have the way that we talk. Simulcast, what that does is imagine you have 3 tower sites. Each of those tower sites operate on a slightly different frequency in a multicast scenario, that way they don't interfere with each other. In simulcast, where you have issues with in-building penetration, where you have a lot of buildings, for example, that you want to do coverage inside of buildings, or you have a lack of frequency availability. Those frequencies are spectrum. It's a fixed commodity, just like land. When you run out, you're out. So you factor in those 2 aspects whenever you're looking at a simulcast solution. So we use the simulcast solution for the Highway 30 corridor up along the Columbia River and in the more populated densities into a single simulcast cell. What that means is that each of those towers transmits at the same frequency at slightly offset timing intervals. And the reason you do that is to prevent interference, negative interference, or destructive interference. What you get from that benefit is something called constructive interference. So when those 2 signals merge at the same time, they actually increase the power capability of that signal. That's what improves your in-building penetration. So that's why simulcast is important. So when we go through the coverage, we'll talk a little bit more about the in-building coverage that's being offered as a solution, but that's to get coverage into the schools, coverage into critical buildings, coverage into homes. If you ask a law enforcement officer what's the most dangerous call they can go on, 90% of the time the response is domestic abuse. That domestic abuse call, a lot of times is inside the home, inside the house. So having that coverage capability, the peace of mind to be able to push that orange button on the radio to get help if things escalate too quickly. Okay, so now I'm going to step back and let Mr. Raymond walk on through the rest of the solution section.
Okay, so Will talks a little bit about simulcast versus multicast and the hybrid solution. One thing I just want to emphasize when we're talking about the radio infrastructure, as the gentleman in the back of the room pointed out, most people don't care about the infrastructure, right? It's just whether or not they can use their radios and whether or not it's going to work when they hit the PTT button or the emergency button or whatever they need on that radio system to work. But we do put a lot of passion and a lot of work into the infrastructure, and we're going to tell you about our process. We're going to tell you about the assumptions that we made and what we're recommending. And all of that's part of the process of how we operate at Tait. So we're going to tell you why we do things. We're going to tell you what we did. We're going to make sure you're okay with it and you have feedback into it. And this is just the first step of that entire process, the entire design process. So whether it's simulcast or multicast or whatever, the bottom line is on these systems, the end user, there's no intervention from them on the radio. So whether you're driving between 2 different sites, whether you're driving into a simulcast area or a multicast area, to the end user, it's all the same. The radio does all the work in the background. It roams throughout the area without you having to switch channels. You always have communication that's always roaming automatically. The users in the field don't have to worry about it.
There's one piece that I meant to add, and I'll take the opportunity now. The spectrum, the frequency spectrum. There's VHF, there's UHF, there's 7,800 megahertz, and while a lot of that is just, okay, that's the backroom equipment, we don't necessarily even know. It is important to talk about because different options will provide, or different manufacturers provide different options. We provide VHF, UHF, 7,800 megahertz, as well as 900 megahertz and 220 megahertz for that matter. So from an equipment perspective, we can provide any configuration, frequency configuration we want. When we were doing our design, we looked at two frequency bands specifically. One was VHF and one was 7,800. Each of the bands do something better than the other bands. For VHF, typically, it follows the curvature of the earth better. That's the key benefit, is you get greater range out of it. The signaling goes across terrain better, and that's the benefit. With Columbia County, we've got a lot of terrain. So we looked at VHF. 7,800 megahertz is the other frequency band we looked at. The benefits of it, the key benefits are it provides better in-building penetration because it's got a smaller wavelength. And, but it doesn't have the same range of coverage capability that VHF has. So those are the two key differences between 7,800 megahertz and VHF. So we ran an analysis with both frequency spectrums to see what would be better. Should we do some sort of hybrid, say western part of the county use VHF, eastern part use 7800 in building to determine what was the best solution. What we found out was because the terrain changes so quickly, so your hills go up, your hills come down, we've got a lot of them. The biggest issue that we run into from a coverage scenario is not based on the spectrum, it's based on shadow. So all radio communications are line of sight communications. So when you look at the terrain changes, anytime you're on the back side of the hill, it's like being on the back side of the moon. You lose that line of sight capability to the tower that's best delivered your best serve for that area. Since you have that at such quick intervals here in the terrain, VHF does not provide a significant value over 7,800 megahertz from a coverage standpoint because of that shadow effect. That's why we need 14 sites in order to provide the maximum amount of coverage in the county. That way, when you're shadowed from this site here and on the back side, then you're able to get another site coverage into that zone. So VHF, the benefit of further reach, less sites, wasn't really a factor because of the terrain. 7,800 megahertz provides the additional inbuilt penetration. So we decided to stay focused on 7,800 megahertz for our design because you're not being able to like over VHF. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm going to take you up on your offer to be interactive here. And I apologize if you're already going to talk about this, but can you also speak to the fact of the interference issues with VHF and the limited spectrum that's available?
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes on with frequency band. 7,800 megahertz is, let's say, a newer band than VHF, and it's controlled very carefully by regional planning committees. These regional planning committees actually take all of the specific spectrum that has specific spacing in between the channels and then manage it to where they're able to allocate it to agencies or locations, geographies in an effective manner to minimize interference. But when VHF was the primary communication medium, 47800 really became a public safety band, there wasn't these regional planning committees that actually fostered that management of the spectrum. So the frequencies don't have, not always, they don't always have the amount of spacing between the channels necessary to maximize your signal. In other words, you get a little bleed over interference. Now, Pacific Northwest in general is kind of challenged in VHF just because of the amount of disparate VHF systems that are here. Every system that's here, even if it's not the same channels and same frequencies where it's directly interfering with another signal, what it does is it increases the noise floor. So the noise floor is just a stacked white noise bottom that is prevalent in any audio spectrum. It's just existing. So the more VHF instead, the higher that noise floor is. What that means is that the higher the noise floor is, the lower your receiver sensitivity or your radio's ability to receive is. That's going to impact your coverage. Not so much from the tower out to the radios, but from the radios back, which is arguably one of the most important aspects. If a user hits an emergency button, calls for help, they want to know that they're going to be heard. Just because they can hear dispatch doesn't guarantee them. So that's one of the challenges with the interference that VHF creates. 7,800 is a much cleaner spectrum here in the Pacific Northwest, so your receive sensitivity is better. And there's also other mechanisms from a technology standpoint that improve that receive inbound and receive signal. They're called tower top amplifiers that actually improve your balancing on 7,800 megahertz that doesn't provide it in VHF.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit on top of that. In general, when talking about physics in general, the lower your frequency, the more susceptible you are to noise. That's just a common rule of thumb. The lower the frequency, the farther it will travel, as Will mentioned, but the more susceptible it is to noise. Does anyone here now or in the past listen to AM radio in the cars? FM radio sounds a little cleaner, right? It's because there's a little bit more noise. AM radio is a little bit lower than FM radio. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but while listening to an AM radio station, you turn the windshield wipers on in your car while training, you get some noise from those windshield wipers on that AM station. It's just the noise that's generated from your car using those windshield wipers affects AM. It won't affect FM. You listen to your FM radio station all day, you won't hear that noise. So the higher up you go in the frequency bands, the more you're clear of that noise that just from everyday things in life.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and also the LED lighting, you on VHF. Because the VHF 700-800 band is a contentious topic for discounting where they're currently at. So just making sure that we talk a lot about why Tait is recommending 700-800 versus VHF, I think is potentially the most important aspect of these presentations.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, 7,800 megahertz is just a cleaner spectrum. So it's a cleaner space. You're going to have better sensitivity on the radios. You don't have the same coverage that VHF typically has, but again, this county, because of the terrain changes, coverage as far as distance goes, it's not the biggest issue. LED lighting is another issue. Police cars are getting more and more stuff. The static onto it just creates noise. And 700 is susceptible just as VHF is to the LED noise harmonic that's created. But yeah. Okay. So does anybody have any other questions on the spectrum aspect? I know that's a big topic always. All right.
All right, we captured a basic block diagram of the system here. As you can see, it's separated on the top into different sites. You have a simulcast cell, which is a group of sites, but it's representative of one site of the system, and then you have a bunch of multicast sites. And then on the bottom, we have a bunch of servers that's basically the brains and the control and monitoring and management of the system.
Let's see, just a minute, right? When we said that we broke down the system into simulcast hybrid system, simulcast and multicast. So the simulcast system is on the eastern side of the county, circuit going all the way up north. The idea in that simulcast is that's where your primary population density is. The call volume for further west is less, just because of population density. So what we did when we designed this is that we put 6 repeaters here in the simulcast cells at each site. That's capacity, quantity of users that it's capable of supporting. On the multicast sites, where there's less call volume, we put 4 repeaters. The idea behind that is to be as cost effective as possible, providing the same service level and the same capabilities across the board. So, in P25, we'll probably still some of the raised thunder here. In P25, there's 2 different configurations. There's phase 1 and phase 2. They both use a 12.5 kilohertz, which is a narrow band channel. The phase 2 takes that 12.5 kilohertz channel and says you have to have the equivalence of 6.25 kilohertz. All it is spectrum management. So phase 1 is frequency, FDM, frequency division multiple access. And then phase 2 is time domain multiple access. So the difference there is that there's 2 voices or 2 voice slots for communications that get placed on that same size channel. Now, why is this important? Quantity of users. We designed the system for public safety, for their usage, their capacity demands in phase 1, P25 phase 1. So that's the 6 channels in the simulcast zone, and then the 4 channels in the multicast sites. What we did is we also included at no additional charge TDMA option or phase 2 option. What that means is that you basically double your capacity capabilities on that system. And what that does is it enables schools to join in, it enables public works, it enables the various other agencies that are part of the county that also need radio communications to join onto the singular network. So now, rather than the county having to pass bonding measures to buy public works system, law enforcement system, fire system, school system, we put them all together to where we've got the capacity and capabilities into a singular system, overall saving the constituents money.
Okay. Well, just for clarity, I don't think we ever really, I just want to be clear that everybody understands what simulcast versus multicast is. Simulcast basically says when you key up the transmitter sitting up on the mountaintop or sitting basically in a simulcast cell, you're transmitting from all of those radio channels, all those locations simultaneously. And the reason you do that is because when you get into highly populated areas, you have buildings, sound doesn't travel well around the corner. So what you have to do is you plan for obstructions, and by doing simulcast systems, you're basically pointing antennas into an overlapping field so that you can actually flood that area with communication. So if I'm an officer and I'm on a foot pursuit and I run around the corner, I don't want to lose the tower or lose communications because I ran around the block. I want to be able to keep and now switch to another tower. And if I'm talking to dispatch, that dispatcher is communicating. I want to be able to hear no matter where I am what's going on. So that's the difference. When you get into a multicast, you're actually looking at individual sites that are transmitting because there's nothing really blocking me. So I don't need every tower to be transmitting. I only need that tower to transmit, the one I'm registered to. So in one model, and that's why we call it a hybrid, because you don't need to have that simulcast everywhere. You really just need that in areas where you're going to have a lot of blockage, right? So that's really the difference between a simulcast type environment and a multicast environment. I'm sorry, guys, I mean, I want to make sure we're clear.
Thank you, Doug. And the reason, another one of the biggest reasons that we typically try to use simulcast if we can is because, Will mentioned this earlier, frequencies are very valuable commodity. We have a customer that's building a system in the Chicago area right now, and they've spent millions of dollars trying to acquire frequencies to build out their system. Millions of dollars through, and they're still having troubles acquiring the frequencies that they need. So frequencies are a very valuable commodity. If you can save from having to get more frequencies than you need by implementing a simulcast system, it is ideal. However, historically speaking, building simulcast networks has been difficult based on the older generations of technology. So one thing I just want to touch on is that we are an industry leader in designing simulcast systems. We have multiple generations of simulcast technology that we've implemented throughout the world, not just here in the U.S., but all over the world. And the block diagram that we threw up there before, one thing I wanted to emphasize from it was how simple it was. Our base station, our radio, is basically an all-inclusive box that controls simulcast. It votes all the signals from an area together, and it's basically your one-stop shop for controlling and managing your simulcast network. So has anyone here ever been in a telecommunications site or a radio site, even a phone room? You see tons of punch blocks and wires and card cages. It's not like that anymore. With the system that we have proposed and then deployed around the world, it's basically just a simple box that controls all the time. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on system design requirements and specifically coverage. Understanding the requirements from the users. I know Tyler spent quite a bit of time talking about user interaction and gathering information from the people that are actually going to use the radio system. So this is important to us. We want to make sure that the coverage is reliable. We design all of our public safety systems with a minimum of 95% reliability.
Let's define that. So there's two percentage numbers that come out in these type of conversations. One is a bounded area design coverage percentage. So that would say you've got the boundary of Columbia County within, that's 100%. Within that, we're going to provide 95% coverage, for example, over that bounded area. So 95% of the county geography will be covered. The second number is reliability. So 95% reliability, which is the industry standard for public safety communications. What that means is that 95 out of 100 times you PTT in anywhere that's in a covered area zone, that it will go through. So it would be, for example, like queuing or other issues with your cell phone. Sometimes you pick up, just doesn't work. You try again, and then it goes through. Same concept there, but it's a contractual requirement to deliver that functionality. So we designed our system based on that 95% reliability. We'll talk about the boundary area coverage as we get into the actual coverage design.
So how do radio signals actually work in the real world? Well, if you ever go out and actually measure a radio signal, it's never just a set amount. It's always fluctuating. Signals are always bouncing off of walls or off of buildings. It's always fluctuating. It's never steady. So what we do is we take that fluctuation that we typically see in the environment and we go below it. So if it can go up or down by a certain amount, we'll go below it, and then we'll raise that up to 95% to make sure that we can guarantee that 95% of the time you will be able to use your radio.
The other big key component to the design of the coverage zone is the delivered audio quality. That's at the AAQ 3.4. So TIA published a definition of what delivered audio quality is. That delivered audio quality means the audible value or the quality of that audio comes to the signal. DAQ 3.4 is the baseline for public safety communications, which means that rarely do you have to repeat to understand. Now, you get somebody from Texas, you might have to repeat a couple of times to understand. But the idea is that the audio will be clear enough to where you can easily understand it with very minimal request for repeat, which is extremely important in a hot situation. Okay.
So, additional design considerations, we always want to minimize the site count and maximize the available coverage. So if anyone's ever gone through a coverage exercise, you'll probably come to the conclusion that 3, 4, 5 sites probably cover 80% of your area. But getting that last 15, 20% to get from 75% or 80% to 95%, we could triple your site count. We routinely see that.
In-building penetration is another key aspect to look at when you're looking at site count. So if we look at the land mass, 686 square miles is the size of Columbia County. So if we look at that 686 square miles and take the free loss calculation or equation that says signal can travel X distance, then it would take roughly 4 sites to cover the entire county with coverage. Now that's not guaranteeing reliability. That's just being able to saturate the entirely flat vacuum area. Columbia County is not flat. It also has buildings, it has trees, it has all of these other things that block that signal, that free space signal from being delivered all the way to the end user and the end user back. When you're looking at the towers are transmitting out at pretty high powers. A base station is rated at 100 watts. So at 100 watts, then you have amplification on top of that to the tower, to the antenna, and you can sometimes be broadcasting at over 300 watts out from that tower location. Now, your portable radio that you're carrying there, you've got a Harris XL200 on you. The Harris XL200 7800 megahertz broadcast out to 3.8 watts. So 3.8 watts is pretty small power output when you're looking at it from that 300 watt transmitter that's going out to the tower. So when we're doing our design consideration, we have to balance that system to where when we're talking out from the tower as well as talking back into the tower, it's going to be roughly the same average design. And that's part of
I have a quick question. How many tower sites are you guys planning? Does this proposal cover for Columbia County?
14 sites.
And so Multnomah County is smaller, a little bit smaller in land mass. Washington County is a little bit bigger. Can you kind of side by side how many towers each of those counties have compared to the current land we're going to?
Sure. So Washington County.
Can you restate the question just to make sure?
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
So the question was neighboring counties with similar land masses, some a little bit bigger, some a little bit smaller. How many sites do they use for their coverage footprint as compared to what we're proposing with 14 sites? That's the question. I don't want to misstate and be inaccurate. I believe the Multnomah County, Washington County, I want to say they are 14 or 15 sites, if I'm not mistaken. Clackamas County is over 20 sites. Kitsap County, which is another county just west of Puget Sound, they're looking at 16 sites, and they've got a 580 square mile footprint. Every county or every geography is going to be a little bit different as far as the requirement. 14 sites, I would say, is conservative enough to where you have to meet over coverage when we start talking about the coverage. We'll look at it. But it's not an overabundance of sites. Depending on the geography and location that you're at, I just did a system for Clinton County, Illinois, which is actually very similar in land mass size, but it's flat and it's cornfields. And it took 5 sites to provide the 95% boundary coverage there. But again, flat cornfields. Remember here, our issue is not being able to get signal out, because we can do a 4-site VHF system, we can cover the entire county. The issue is all the shadowing that's created by the terrain changes. So those terrain changes, when you get shadowed, you have to have a tower location somewhere else that's shining in and can still see line of sight. And 14 sites is the most advantageous configuration you can come up with the fewest site counts, but still provides critical coverage primarily to the population density areas, but also to key roads that go through the more rural areas in the western part of the county, which is more recreational. I think that would probably be most important to the sheriff and to the fire users that actually respond to emergencies or vehicular accidents, as well as more sometimes activities that occur in that portion of the county. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just want to talk a little bit more about our process. So I'm going to dwell a little bit on coverage, one, because that's my area of expertise, and I geek out on it a little bit. But two, because coverage is the most important thing from my perspective for a radio system. You got to be able to cover the range and talk. So we use a tool called EDX. EDX is actually an industry accepted tool. It's used by other vendors, it's used by the consultant community, it's even used by university professors to teach courses. My first work trip fresh out of college over 20 years ago was actually to EDX for training right here in Oregon. They are based out of Eugene. So I did a training session with EDX over 20 years ago. They're still around, still an industry leader. We use high resolution terrain data. We talk about the reliability metrics that we use, and everything that we do and input into our tools based on a standard that Tyler actually referenced earlier, TSP. Everything we do is by that standard. So we can point and find any number that we use in our tools into that in that book. We don't use a proprietary tool. We are very transparent. We're very open with how we run our propagation. In fact, we are working on a proposal for another project, or we're working on another project where a consultant asked us to help them model a system that we previously modeled. And we absolutely opened up the hood and gave them all the criteria that we were using and said, here, this is how we came up with our coverage studies. So we're very open and transparent on that.
There's an important aspect that if you look at other manufacturers or other manufacturers in the same presentation we're doing, I urge you to ask them if they would guarantee coverage with other manufacturers P25 radios. And the reason that is because a lot of times you can use specific proprietary thresholds in your modeling, which will make the coverage look more advantageous. But it's going to be a requirement that only buy this specific high-level radio to guarantee our coverage. Our design is based on 688 standards, which means that any P25 cap group compliance program radio meets that TSP threshold, so we guarantee coverage with all of those radios. It gives you the freedom of choice instead of being forced into a singular radio at whatever price it's being sold at.
So in our design reports, we'll provide every number that goes into our calculations. Not only that, but we'll provide a comment line on the right side that tells you exactly where you can find those numbers within the standard. So we will point right to the standard for every single one of the numbers that we use. In this case, we simulated both coverage on street or outdoors, as well as in two different levels of buildings. And I'll talk about that. We did 4 different groups of coverage studies, I believe. So the first one was mobile sites, mobile coverage. With the 14 site setup that you see here, mobile coverage is pretty much blankets the county. So that's your mobile radio and your standard police vehicle or fire vehicle. It's pretty much going to have coverage, both talk in and talk out. Okay, green is good here.
Ray, can you describe the podcast?
Yeah, we can do that. So talk out means from the tower to the radio. Remember we were talking about that 300 watt hour output? From the tower to the radio. Talk back or talk in, as it's referred to, is from that portable radio or mobile radio back to the tower. So that's the difference between talk and talk. Again, whenever you're designing the system, we want to design it to be as balanced as possible, which is impossible to balance with portable and mobile, so you try to figure out the best case scenario to balance it out. Again, portable radios are pushing back at 3.5 watts versus a mobile that's pushing back at almost 30 watts, as well as the antenna locations a little bit different.
So this is simulated portable coverage. So this actually shows shows 3 different levels. At this distance, it's probably a little hard to see the pink and the green, as the blue area represents a medium strength building. So what we did was we basically took a simulation of what we consider a light building and a medium building. From our perspective, a light building is kind of like a 1 or 2 story residential house, wood framing, just a standard residential building. 12 dB building is more of your medium grade building, so that's more of a, like a 1 story, almost like a strip mall or something like that. Maybe a small school. And then we can dive deeper into Google Earth. I just want to stress a little bit. Every coverage study that we do, we also produce a Google Earth file for it, and there's a reason for that. What you guys just saw probably looked like pretty nice maps that painted a lot of the area. I had 2 experiences with customers that I did. One was Otsego County, New York. There was a standard RFP written. Tait as a company responded to it and we won the bid. The RFP asked for 95% coverage. We provided 95% coverage. Everyone was happy. When the system was built out, users were unhappy. And the reason was that the 5% that we didn't cover happened to be where 5 fire departments in the county were, and a couple of police chiefs' houses and things like that. So the 95% coverage is just a blanket statement. It didn't work for them. We've gone back and we worked with them exclusively. They're extremely happy. We've added a couple fill-in sites, and they're, like I said, they're very happy. It was a lesson learned on how to write requirements and share where exactly you need that 95% coverage. Another customer that I worked with, actually right next door, PG&E, Kevin mentioned them. PG&E brought us in on the first step, which is it's not different than what's happening today. We provided a bunch of KMZ files, a bunch of Google Earth files, and we zoomed in. We zoomed in beyond those zoomed out maps. We zoomed into those areas where there wasn't coverage. And then PG&E said, you know what, we have lines that we need covered. We have crews that work in those areas. We need coverage in that area. And we wound up moving sites around and making the system work for their users. So it's a critical step, I think.
Can someone on the virtual meeting verify they can see this?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is the Google Earth overview of the county and the coverage that's being provided by the 14 site design. You can see these, it's kind of hard to see, I apologize. We'll zoom in as much as we can in certain areas and zoom out to where it still makes sense. These little yellow thumbtacks are the site locations that we've chosen. So there's 14 sites, there's 14 little thumbtacks spread out slightly outside the county, but providing coverage into the county. So in this configuration, our focus was again twofold in that hybrid configuration. One being simulcast, one being multicast sites. So simulcast sites follow Highway 30 all the way up to cover the population density and to provide maximum in-building penetration into this area. This is where the majority of schools are, the majority of the housing, the areas where in-building coverage is most important. If you notice here, it's kind of hard to see the difference in colors. Blue, which the majority of everything you see here, this zoomed in view is blue, emulates that 12 dB building, or that medium building. Pink, which will zoom in on the lower area pink here, pink says that we have coverage for a portable radio inside a house, or a 6 dB building. Maybe not inside of a 12 dB building, depending on how they concrete construction versus wood siding, for example. The green means that we have coverage on the street. So portable radio coverage right there on the street. And then yellow is going to be, we don't really have yellow right here. We can run this file some more. It's just over here. The yellow area would be that you'll have mobile coverage, but not necessarily portable on the hip coverage. Get your radio off of your hip and held it in front of you, people still get coverage, but not when you're factoring in the loss of the body, put it on your hip. So make sure that we have coverage in buildings along the I-30 corridor as much as possible, and then maximizing the footprint as we move more into rural areas. But again, we're limited by the terrain, the vast terrain changes on the western portion of the county. So we didn't want to say, okay, let's just add 20 more sites. That makes it cost prohibitive, it's just unrealistic. So how can we maximize the coverage footprint to where the first responder community and constituents are as safe as possible for the communication capability, but not be fiscally responsible and provide unrealistic capability. And this is the site composition of the community. So if you notice, we have pretty good in-building coverage across the county. Now, there are some areas that you don't have necessarily in-building coverage at a detailed level. And in those scenarios, we try to maximize our design, our antenna parameters, etc., to where we're covering the roadways. The middle of the woods might be a search and rescue situation, or a deputy that might need to get in there on pursuit where the communications are employed. But again, if we're saturating the entire county 100% coverage, then it's unrealistic from fiscal responsibility. All right, is there any areas anybody wants us to zoom in on, or
yeah, the big, huge area down at the bottom right there, my fire district, that will be covered. Right there.
Right here?
Nope, everything down south of the county line in Multnomah County, into Washington County.
Gotcha.
Right there.
Yep.
Do you have the area boundary selected there?
It is, so the area, the boundary right here, it's kind of hard to see, but there's the red county boundary.
So that boundary is the boundary they used for the 911 call report, and it does, maybe it's incorrect, Josh, but if you scroll down, can you scroll into Highway 30, according to this pass right there? Right where your cursor is. Keep scrolling. And so up north, please. So that red line, you can see it on the left, was what makes up the fire district boundary. What was that off, correct?
So that's the fire district down there, we're going to put that RK 6.
Okay.
So, okay, our design characteristics and how we based it was based off of this jurisdictional boundary that was defined for us. As far as other areas of coverage that we might need to have coverage, one, we can look at other site configurations to provide coverage into that area, or two, look at that's where the ISSI comes into place. Washington County already has great coverage on the southern portion of it. So that would be a great situation where we set up an intergovernmental agreement with Washington County where there are users that specifically that need that area of coverage are able to roam between the two systems seamlessly. And in that ISSI configuration where that roaming, it's seamless roaming. So you set the top group on the radio, fire dispatch line. It doesn't matter what system you're on, as long as it's connected to the ISSI. You never have to change the channel. It's not like the old conventional days where you have to change channels every time you get a landing, right? A lot of people probably still remember that. Well, God's still remember that today. The trooper just left, but I'm sure he could talk to it. So it's going to be seamless from a user perspective with that ISSI. Yes, ma'am.
This is probably a dumb question, but
No.
On your cell towers, are they all at equal strength?
No, ma'am.
So if you got one here and one here, I don't know how to explain this. So this one's put down like at 80%, or can go, to you it's like at 80%, but when it gets to that other fellow, it could be like 70, 60%?
Sure.
And then is that why the other tower kicks in to bring him back up to like 80?
Yep, so
did that make sense?
It does. I understand where you're going to. So the towers, it's a roaming calculation of how that user is moving from point A to point B, and all the towers in between them to provide that coverage to them. So in P25, you use what's called a talk group as a channel. That talk group is just a digital identifier that is frequency agnostic. So which site is actually transmitting, that user doesn't care because the radio has a table in the so it's a computer. That radio has a table, a database in it that's always checking all of the towers. So as it moves from tower A to tower B, and the signal, say the driver on 30, that signal at tower B becomes stronger. There's an algorithm in the radio that says this is now a better site for me to attach to than that previous. So the radio itself switches. No different than today. You drive, you can be on a singular phone call, not miss a single syllable of conversation all the way from here to Eugene.
So it
Which
just
is not
does
completely true.
it just does it for you?
It does it for you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Will, I have a question. So, just to make clear, this is all based on portable radio from the hit. And so with that, we're also dealing with an 8.5 dB loss for on the hit. Do we have any idea for like the Stanton Fire District, the ASA Legal Service Area that extends to the west there, beyond the fire district? Do we have any idea of like if we remove that 8.8% loss, so in other words, they were using a portable radio from their head level, do we have any idea how much that would fill in?
Well,
Because
so what we can do, I can do two things. One, I think we have another map here where I can show mobile coverage and see how much that goes in. I mean, a lot of this, you can tell by how sharp the changes are in color. The more dynamic the changes in color means more terrain related, so it's more shadow effect. So it's not necessarily a power capability delivery or a loss factor that's the biggest issue. The biggest issue is just line of sight and availability. If you look in at the paint, for example, versus blue, blue means inside of 12 dB, pink means inside of 60. That's 6 dB difference between those two, which is almost equivalent of the 8 dB body loss factor. So if you change from taking it off of your holster, wherever you're wearing the radio, and bring it up to your mouth and key it up there, you gain that 3 foot, as well as you lose the body factor loss. That's almost equivalent of that 6 dB change. So moving from blue to pink. So you can get a pretty good idea of what the difference would be if you're using it on the hip versus in hand, just by looking at the movie. Again, this southern portion here of the county, this is terrain limited. I would imagine that if we looked at a terrain profile, like what road is this?
That'd be Skyline, Rocky Point. Sorry, 89. Can you go to that?
If anybody can read that, I'll give you a dollar. I can't read it from here. Dunn Mountain Road? Dixie Mountain. Dixie Mountain. All right. Dixie Mountain Road there. Is anybody familiar with that area? Yeah. Yeah, so tell me, is there a bit of a terrain change from here? All right. Here on top of the ridge. Top of the ridge. There we go. So you can see the variation, how quickly coverage drops from having great in-building penetration to having nothing in a very short distance. Typically when you see that in coverage perspective, it's going to remain limited. Again, line of sight radio. So how we would fix that, if it was imperative that we get coverage in this area, let's say Washington County says, we don't want to work with you, we don't like you guys that much, so no, you can't provide massive side of residential coverage. We would most likely look at a tower site here in this section along, what is this? 26?
That's way far later. So the site up on top of Dixie Mountain or FAA, it would probably be ideal. But I don't even think Washington County has coverage in that area. Their nearest site is Cornelius Pass. And last I checked, they didn't have coverage either. But Dixie Mountain would be the closest location to the local site that would cover that area.
So what we'd do is we'd actually create a search ring. We would look at all available existing towers. Every tower is published with an ASR, antenna structure registration, and that's published with the FCC. So we can actually pull from the FCC database that shows all towers that are in an area that are actually registered. And then with those orders, and if there is no towers that provide coverage, then we would look at greenfield builds or physical geography that would make no sense, and then we started going through that process to see if we can actually build a tower there. Yes, sir.
Of the 14 proposed tower sites, creating 95% coverage, how many of those towers are outside of the Columbia County 911 district? And how do you then create a lease agreement with where those are sited, so that's taken off of the, I guess, customer, CC 911, in developing that coverage area? So how do we know that we will have that consistency on times, a 30-year lease, or so I'd be curious to know more about that.
Yeah, so the county boundary is not as big from a jurisdictional standpoint. Getting lease agreements, it's not, the county necessarily, it doesn't really play that. It's more about who owns that location, whether it's a Crown Castle, which is a commercial organization that builds towers and leases to public safety primarily, or if it's Jimbo that has a high spot on his land that sells Verizon the ability to put a monocle there, right? All of that is registered, we use all of that information to identify locations. So what we do is we go into find out who the owner is and start that discussion. We work with Columbia County 911 to have those conversations. And the agreement is with Columbia County 911 and the lease owner or the landowner, whatever that declaration be. The state is going to deal with that because the acquisition of the agreement. They're going to, my time to shoot County 911, there were quite a few of these. And some other reasons done this. I would say it's a lot easier to go find someone that has an existing tower, because again, if they put it out on the property, the odds are they're trying to make money off of that property. So then it's just determining what is the value. Most people see the value of public safety communications, and they don't try to approach public safety for lease space, or they will with Verizon and AT&T, unless they choose in subject, which is backyard, which is also what happens. But that's how we would handle the conversation. Greenfield builds are a little bit different. Right? Greenfield build, when you hear me say greenfield, that means that there is no tower location there. It's just the best physical geography location to have a tower. Sometimes that makes more sense because if you have the right location, and this is why engineering design is so important when you're looking at a system. If you have the right location, that might link 3 or 4 other sites that you would have had to use to provide the same coverage as a single site. So then let's talk about 20 years total cost of ownership. Let's say it's $1,000 and $12,000 a year across 20 years, it's $240,000. $240,000 to build a site. If you're paying $240,000 across 4 different sites, that's almost $1 million. Okay? So $1 million for 4 sites provides the same coverage that you could have gotten for $240,000 to build a tower or place location. So we factor all of that into our design criteria to determine what are those optimal design locations. If there is an infrastructure somewhere that provides even remotely close to the same coverage footprint as a greenfield, then we default to that. If there's not, and it gets to the situation where it takes 3 or 4 additional sites, then we'll default to that. Did that answer your question?
Partially, I have a question. Portion of the question is how many of the current ones that are proposed are outside of our county district?
I believe there's 2 outside of the county right now that are proposed. One being in Columbia Heights up north.
All of the sites that are outside the county are existing sites used today by Columbia Heights. So Columbia Heights, Green Mountain, I think those just 2 of them state. Yeah, I know that those are sites that are being used for the current system.
Good to know. And then those are outside of, I mean, ones in Washington. 2 both are in Washington?
Yes.
Not Washington County, but state.
Correct.
Is that more infrastructure thing, or do you, no, I guess just saying that we would need leasing into current infrastructure landowner? Correct. Because they
And those are existing tower sites. Right. So it's more of a NIG, intergovernmental agreement is what it is.
How many of the 14 are greenfields?
Oh, go back and look. I want to say that there were roughly 4 that were greenfield with no infrastructure. There were a couple that actually had some level of infrastructure. Tyler was the one that we went that had the shelter. So
that's
So there are a couple that have a minimal level of infrastructure. When we look at it, and that's a factor that we have to consider too when we're looking at the overall design, total cost of ownership. The infrastructure that we're proposing, that Motorola was proposing, is the infrastructure, the radio infrastructure. It's not necessarily the civil infrastructure, but the towers that are going to be required to provide the same level of coverage. So you have to factor that into the cost.
How many current tower sites are you guys utilizing? Are you guys using all the current sites at Columbia County?
So we actually use all of Columbia County 911 sites that are existing. We also hold ODOT sites and hold local municipality sites, and then we did an ASR search. So we put all of these, I want to say it was 40-something sites into a configuration where we can determine out of these 40 sites, what is the most ideal. Okay, now let's prioritize other sites that would be preference. So for example, Columbia County 911 sites that are existing are going to be top priority sites that we want to focus. However, if one of them provides a value, then we only use it. So that was how we calculated. I don't know the exact quantity. I'd have to look at the site list. I believe I do have that in the presentation when we get to it, we'll look at it to see what are existing sites. But we didn't want that to overly sway our decision on designing the system.
Just a little bit further on this, so Columbia Heights, which is the furthest site north there in Washington, that site was actually purchased by Columbia 911 back during the birth system bills back around 2001. So they own that site. The Green Mountain site to the right, to the east there, that's the second site of Washington. That's actually an SRP township radio project, and Columbia 911 has an agreement with SRP to be on that tower in exchange for them allowing SRP to be on their class 9 tower.
Sure. I have one more. And if you're going to get to it in the future, let me know. But how is this going to affect our in-car computers? Is that going to get better coverage up in the hills and the mountains, or does this not affect that?
So this is standalone from how your in-car computers or your MPTs are currently operating. I would assume you're currently using Breakpoint or other cellular router to provide that connectivity back into the network system.
We have hotspots on our vehicles.
Hotspots, there we go. So you're using the cellular network rather than the P25 network. In our configuration, we have, well, first off, the system is designed with data capabilities in place. So you'll have, I think there's a question of Teams too, you can check that for me. You have the data capabilities built into P25. P25 is not a high-speed cellular network. It's not broadband. It's 9600 baud. If you're highly technical and you understand what baud is, that means slow as it's actually slower than its old AOL. So 9600 baud is not the best data capability. However, for CGIS returns, for license plate running, 9600 baud is fine. You have to wait 25, 30 seconds for license plate search to come back. That's not a huge deal, as long as you're able to get that communication identified. For example, during traffic stop, if there's an active warrant when you're about to walk up to the window, no, that's what defines how hot the situation gets, how quick. So our mobile radios actually have data capabilities built into them, so where you can plug directly out of your MDT into that radio, and then that radio will communicate back across the infrastructure, P25 infrastructure, to where it doesn't have that signal capability. Then we would just tie your CAD systems or your NCIS or whatever other server systems into the network to where you can communicate across that backbone with the regional networks. Again, primary communication and secondary communication with those is slow. It's designed for this. Thank you. Yes, sir. And by the way, all manufacturers, as well as our patent people, it's just a matter of how much you can charge. Yes, sir.
We talk about 95% coverage. What is the current coverage for Columbia County?
Yeah, so we did not model the existing system for coverage. So one, even if we modeled it, it would be modeled assuming that everything's tuned perfectly. The existing system has been in place for some amount of time. I'd be willing to bet that tuning is drifting and it's not perfectly tuned. I would defer to some of the users that are trying to operate on the system for a reference on what coverage is.
Sure, basically mentioned
yeah. The existing system is VHF, and it uses 6 sites to provide coverage, 5 sites.
No, there's 6 simulcast sites and 10 total. I've seen 10 to 12. I think there's 10, but somebody keeps saying 12, so I don't know.
I believe a few of those are received only.
Yeah, at least 4 of those are received only.
So the existing system today, VHF, a couple things wrong. It was initially deployed, which is operating the way it needed to operate at the time. Over time, equipment, just like computers, drift a little bit because they're constantly vibrating, right? So that creates an oscillation drift. When that drift happens, it doesn't work at peak performance. So that's issue 1. Issue 2 is since the initial deployment of that system, there's been a lot of noise, a lot of additional systems that have come online, increasing the noise floor. So now the sensitivity of coverage has dropped from that. And then 3 is just a lot of technology that's developed over the last 20 years that provide much more improved coverage capability at the same position. So I don't know where the existing coverage is, but our design obviously reflects coverage. Any other questions?
You reconfigure your frequencies as needed, you just highlighted it consistently.
Yes. So that's part of the tuning process. In a good don't know, a new Kia Soul, how long that car lasts is based on how well you take care of that car, right? So if you get regular interval full changes and preventative maintenance, that's new tires, tire rotation, that car will last you for a long time. If you never change the oil in the car, I don't care if it's paint over, I don't care if it's Kia Soul, it's not going to last that long. It's going down. Right? That's just part of the nature of the comparison. So in our system of controls, the maintenance aspect is critical. So preventative maintenance inspection, we go out and actually measure. So when we deploy the system, we baseline the system. So here are all of the parameters that are very important to use as a baseline. Every quarter, or every 6 months, or every year, depending on how your intervals is defined, and the specific piece of equipment that go up the top, you take another measure. And then there's a variance. Now there's an acceptable variance, which is normal, or there's an unacceptable variance. If there's an unacceptable variance, then now let's troubleshoot to figure out why. One, let's make sure it's covered in the warranty, we'll figure it out. And then two, let's fix it before it creates a bigger issue that will be much more widespread. So to answer your question, you have to constantly be touching the system, whether it's an oil system, whether it's a E.F. Johnson system, whether it's a Tait system, you have to maintain the system. That's one of the 20-year TCO, the 20 years low cost of ownership is so important because that number includes somebody touching the system. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
The councilman indicated that we have 10 towers, VHF towers currently, and if your proposal is to increase that number by 14 for UHF, I'm concerned that UHF, because of its own limitations, is not going to be enough.
Well, I agree on UHF. UHF is not my favorite spectrum. We're offering 7,800 megahertz, which is a little bit different frequency spectrum. It provides a better in-building penetration than what UHF does. UHF is the utility player. It's the, you ever have motorcycles? It's the dual sport. It's not great at road. It's not great on the dirt, but it'll do low pitching. That's UHF. So we want to stay away from UHF specifically for this configuration. The 10 sites in VHF, I don't know that all 10 are transmitting sites. I believe a couple of those are receive-only sites, and which is normal in a VHF configuration because you're transmitting 300 watts right, out of the tower, whereas the radio is only transmitting back 6 watts in VHF, 5 to 6 watts. So you need more receive sites to be able to capture that signal coming back than what you need to transmit out. In our 7,800 megahertz configuration, it's a little bit more balanced. We use what's called tower top amplifiers. Those tower top amplifiers sit on the top of the tower and actually increase that receive signal on every side. So the equivalent would be now every of those 10 sites, every site will transmit and receive in a balanced format, which just drives more efficiency to the coverage footprint. Does that make sense? Yes.
So, although you might get into it, but voltage contraction, you're going to
Yes. Everything that we've done has been designed specifically on TSP. So in other words, the real world application with our Tait radios, the were to use our exact Tait radio that we proposed, interconfiguration coverage would actually look a little bit better. But because we designed to the standards, we're going to one, the overall areas, getting was, that's why we go to a lower standard level to be able to guarantee that coverage.
By the way, I would comment on that. We did a system in just outside of Chicago, and when we talked about noise floors earlier, the estimated for the noise floor was around Chicago, and we were wrong. It was higher than what we expected. We wound up having to add sites. We guaranteed the coverage. We added the sites. So that's our responsibility as part of the coverage.
That means at our cost. So if we don't meet our contractual commitment of coverage, then we will buy the sites to add to be able to deliver that level of coverage guarantee. Thank you. Any other questions on coverage? Yes, sir.
So we've all seen the cellular ads that claim that they have 99% coverage of those towers. If that is the case, would it not be cheaper to piggyback on the cellular networks and fix those 1% of the area that is not covered by cell phones currently, rather than redo a whole new system?
It could be. It could be more cost effective. You have to look at what the monthly plan cost is and amortize that across how many years you're using as your baseline for the total cost of ownership. In certain areas, first off, I just so many limitations. Now, also, cellular is a commercial technology. What that means is that it's not critical infrastructure. So if a call drops, which I'm sure everyone's experienced a call drop, there's no answer. Nobody thinks twice about it. However, if you're on scene, a dynamic situation, and you hit your red emergency button because you just got shot or there's a situation going on, and that call drops, that's a huge issue, right? And their manufacturers get sued over that. That's why there's a guarantee and there's a culpable liability aspect to the critical infrastructure. Same difference if you're a fire responder and you go in scene and you're on a structure and the structure comes down and you hit that button, or you call a mayday for everyone to get out and they don't hear it because the call dropped, and then the building collapses and you just have 15 people inside. That's the difference between commercial infrastructure and critical infrastructure.
When you look at power failures and all, that commercial infrastructure typically goes down pretty quick, right? Any storm, first thing you lose is your cellular connectivity. Any type of major crisis, you typically lose because of call volumes and stuff like that. Radio systems, and there's been a number of examples, especially when you do utility type infrastructure. Utilities, the restoration process is all done through the radio infrastructure, right? Being able to flood people. So for a utility, it's critical those radio systems stay active when every other system has failed. So look at any hurricane, whether it's Florida, Sandy in New York, any of those took out all of their commercial infrastructure, but all of their radio systems stay alive because they're independent systems, they're powered separately, they're not part of that infrastructure generator, where you don't have that same support on a commercial type infrastructure.
There's also the quality of service aspect too, and you probably notice this. You go to a football game or just go say you go to the Timberwolves game and you're in that stadium and there's a whole bunch of users in there. Well, that system, that eNote is what it's called. That's the call processing control functionality of cellular network. It's overwhelmed, so it doesn't prioritize the traffic that comes in. So let's say there's a natural disaster or an event that occurs. What happens? First responders, what direction do you go? Major event, you go toward the event that just occurred, not away. You flood into this area that now you bring in a whole bunch of users into one area, and it's overwhelming the capabilities of that site because it's not designed for that. It's designed for just typical everyday commercial use. So now when you get overwhelmed, you have queuing issues, and the calls aren't going to go through because it's stacked into the queue, waiting for the first the channel. So that's another aspect of the commercial. There are other technologies, like FirstNet, for example, which is it's really AT&T right now, but it's an AT&T network that's designed to provide quality of service or priority to first responders. FirstNet's definitely an option in the county. However, the AT&T coverage here, who has AT&T, is a bit challenged.
We just switched to it. I don't like it.
And again, I'm not really on the soapbox about Band 14 and FirstNet. It's still an AT&T given until we actually deploy the frequency band. So it doesn't provide all the capabilities that it's designed to provide. Does that answer your question? Any other questions?
Are these power stations proposed, are they designed to be able to co-locate for like array equipment or something else, or do you guys have experience contracting with cell companies?
We do. We have significant experience with working with cell companies, with commercial tower operators, as well as locals that just own the land and have towers specifically to create revenue stream. So we've worked across the board. Those are usually typically easy. It's just a matter of, one, let's find out fair price and negotiate that price. And then two, what else is on the tower to make sure it's not interfering with it. Those are easy. When we get into greenfield builds, that's where it gets a little bit more challenging. And Oregon has a few extra challenges as far as going through the land permitting process and actually build. But again, we're very experienced in that area. We'll be right there along the county the whole way. But yeah, people like Verizon or AT&T are typically really okay, cost. I'm sure a couple people are interested in this. We'll get into that, the full pricing in a little bit. I just wanted to give a little example of what a first site cost looks like. So a lot of manufacturers of solutions might be offering different site counts. That's important when you're looking at it from a coverage perspective, because emergency band affects coverage as well as in-building penetration, and then the guarantee of coverage is also associated. At the end of the day, business is business. If you have a Motorola repeater, if you have a Kenwood repeater, if you have a Tait repeater, it's limited to the power output, and then there's a receiver sensitivity. Everything else is math. It's physics. So it's not one manufacturer is able to magically create more signal than another. It's virtually the same. It's just based on receiver sensitivity and power output. But our simulcast sites on a per site basis is $358,000. That includes equipment for the site as well as the actual labor to install for them. Multicast site is just a hair less. The reason that it's a hair less is that multicast sites have less repeaters on them than what our simulcast sites have. There's also slightly different equipment configuration. I guess I'm kind of blind. Slightly different equipment configuration between multicast and simulcast, just because of the technology that it uses. But if you have other presentations that are occurring and they would say the price, this is how you can extrapolate an apples to apples comparison on the offering from cost perspective as you break it down on a per site basis. All right, so we provided three different solutions for microwave. Microwave backhaul is what connects all of the sites. You'll notice that there are 15 hops or 15 connections within the system. Ray, you were supposed to be presenting this, I'm sorry. I started talking. So while it is a 14-site system, there, again, we talk about the terrain and how vast it is and how the terrain changes so much. So we had to add one repeater connection, one repeater site for the microwave connectivity in order to provide the full connectivity to the system. Just because the LMR and the radio low frequency carries further than line of sight microwave, which is a much higher frequency spectrum. So you can see it's a ring topology, and it doesn't look like a ring, it's very sharp points. But every single site has two paths, one east, one west, one north and south. That doesn't matter the location, but the fact that it has two paths is really important. If you have what's called a spur, or only one path, for example, let's say this doesn't exist, you only have one path. If you lose that path, and if you lose that site that connects that path, well, that site's not providing any good coverage. So you lose that wide area coverage capability out of that site. So we designed the system specifically to use a ring topology, or where every site has two paths out. That way you don't get into that situation. If you lose a site or if you lose a link, the traffic just routes the other direction. It's called loop protection. So it just adds to the resiliency and redundancy of the network. And we've got two different configuration options. One is an all indoor, and the other one is a split configuration. All indoor just means that all of your equipment sits inside the shelter, and then you've got a waveguide for this really big, that big around, expensive hollow tube that runs up to an antenna, and then that's how it communicates. There's benefits, pros and cons. One, you've got all the electronics inside. You can work on it, you can climb the tower to work on how to work with it. However, if you're hanging something that weighs 5,000 pounds on a tower, and give the tower, that could be the difference between spending $50,000 to reinforce the tower to support it or not. Split configuration just runs a coaxial cable from the indoor radio unit to the power. This one.
Who do you hire to construct those towers?
We've got different partners that we use to do towers. There's different ways to go about the towers. One, we can work directly with Columbia County 911 to release an RFP, and that request for proposal is just listing the specifications for the towers themselves and the shelters and the site, and then letting multiple responders respond, which is a great method. That's what I did when I was at Deschutes County. We actually handled that locally.
Put it out for bid?
Put it out for bid. Okay. Or you can hire a manufacturer to take care of it for you. For example, we do it all the time. What we would do is leverage one of our nationwide subcontractors. Deep South Communications, for example, is a tower manufacturer that travels across the country. They're actually working right now, working on some cellular builds. I talked to them already about some of the tower sites here. They didn't have the scope and cost of it. But we use a partner like that to come in and build the sites. It just depends on if the 911 district wants to take over the responsibility to do that, or if they want to push it all on the vendor to have one throat to choke for it.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, here's just some cost configurations for microwave solutions. So an Aviat, which is a manufacturer of all indoor communications microwave, is $200,000 per home, which puts the total system roughly $3 million in body and microwave. I'll be on split configuration, which and that removes that wave guide. It's a little bit cheaper, $158,000 off. And Ceragon, who's another manufacturer of microwave radios, their split configuration is $105,000 off. So we put that at roughly 1.5 million. Put that way to the system. Any questions on that?
You're not presenting anymore.
Sorry?
You're not presenting anymore.
Did not. Okay. Did it just now stop?
And then you swap back to the
Is it better? Okay. I apologize to everyone on the call. What you missed is on the screen now. You've got 5 seconds to memorize it before I change to the next slide. Okay. Great. You want to come back up and walk through resilience of the design? Sure. Again, as we're doing our design, coverage is very important, but also resilience and redundancy. This goes just like that to the commercial aspect. So if you look at a cellular network, again, it's commercial, it's for profit, so they do put some focus on redundancy because they want to make sure that they get paid to where there's not a lot of downtime, or else they're going to go to another vendor, T-Mobile or something. But for critical infrastructure, for public safety communications, for utility operators, et cetera, we want to make sure that there's redundancy on top of redundancy so that, again, one storm, one lightning strike, something like that doesn't create a single point of failure that will take the system off the air. But that 1 second call might be the most important 1 second of the entire year.
Yeah, we take redundancy very seriously. We want to deploy a system that can endure multiple failures before the users even know anything's going on with the system. So we offer, for all of our servers, we offer full redundancy. So we have 2 servers instead of 1. If one fails, the other one kicks right on and takes right over. Same thing with our base stations. They can take over for each other in the event that one fails. The bottom line is the user doesn't notice. So
whenever there is a failure on the network, again, it's agnostic to the user. Nobody would know that there's actually a failure, except for the management software that we use to send a notification to the technician or to a dispatcher, to someone that will be monitoring the network's position to give notice that there is an issue that needs to be resolved.
So if the primary controller for the whole system goes down, we have a backup one that becomes the master and controls the whole system. In the event that both of those go down, so in the rare event that 2 servers go down that control the entire system, your system goes into what we call site trunking. So the system still stays up. Your dispatcher still has communications with the system. The only difference is now the system operates with a minor degree of control. Whereas before you could control exactly what was on the system, it becomes more of an open system. But it's still operational. Dispatchers still have full functionality. It just doesn't have that extra level of control that the servers were providing. But like I said, there's multiple failures and the system is still up and operating. Users in the field can still talk. In the event that your site controller fails, which is a server at the site that controls the actual trunking, this is like 4 levels of failure here deep. The system will actually send out a message to the radios in the field, and it is a limited service available or fails off is the people in charge. So the users will know, hey, I can talk to the people that are around me, I can talk to the people that are talking to my site. I might not be able to talk to dispatch because I'm getting this alarm on my radio basically saying, I'm in fail soft version, and there's been 4 or 5 failures above my head. So there's something critical going on with the system. The tower, 2 towers fell down. And that's pretty much it. So it's very modular, everything, and it's self-healing. So once these X's go away and these links come back up, these servers get brought back up, and the maintenance tech goes out, everything will heal back and go back to normal status without any kind of intervention from anyone.
All right. For the sake of time, we're going to kind of got through a couple of these slides. Again, I've got the presentation available if you want it. All these next couple of slides are talking about the hardware itself and the benefits of it. The system topology, again, since the hardware is pointless, it's all about the solution. The solution should be the focus. So I'm going to just skip through that real quick. One piece of to tie in is that in our repeaters themselves, they have the capability to be converted into a spectrum analyzer. And what's the value of that? The spectrum analyzer, when we talk about the noise floor interference issues, this is really important because now a user, for example, that's sitting in the dispatch center can say, oh, we just found out that there's a channel down because of interference, which I think probably happens frequently on this VHF network. They can log directly into the repeater, convert it into a spectrum analyzer to see what's going on in real time. Here's the thing about interference. It comes and goes. It's not there all the time. It must be really easy to isolate. So that 15 minutes that it might take a tech from the first time they see that there's an interference issue to drive out to the psychotech and hook up their spectrum analyzer to the antenna to try to find that signal, it'll be gone. It can take months or even years in some scenarios to track down an interference issue. So this is just the benefit of our Tait repeaters, the only one in the industry that has the capability to be converted into a spectrum analyzer in real time to capture that interference much faster.
I'll just touch on this briefly. We have an entire management suite of products that we brand as Tait Enable. Enable Monitor, Enable Insight, Enable Fleet. It's basically all of our management utilities that provide management of the system. What it all does is because these are all IP networks these days, they're all connected via IP, everything's accessible remotely. So when you have something like a failure today, a dispatcher might get a call from, John in the field saying, hey, I'm trying to radio you and no one's responding. Dispatcher might say, all right, I'll call a field technician, go head out to the site and check it out. All of this stuff is connected remotely now. So if there's a failure with a base station, you're going to know in real time. You're going to get an alarm set on the management suite that we're providing. So it's going to say your base station's down. You're experiencing failure, your power management unit is down, or PA is down, something along those lines. Enable Fleet is a very powerful tool. It handles all the programming of the radios on the system, and you can do that all over the air, all wirelessly over the system. So gone are the days where you have to actually drive out to a fire department, for example, find out how many radios they have, if you want to program them with a certain feature. You can do that all wirelessly now. You can find them on the system, send a command, add a channel, add a frequency, whatever you need to do to that radio. Say you have a fire department in a neighboring county, and they want their channel programmed into your radios, you can do that all over the air. You don't have to drive out to their location to gather all the radios and physically touch them.
On that, real quick, we've talked about open standards and are focused to the standards this entire time. It's no different in this situation. We still support what's called H25 Tier 2 data services to where we can do that OTAP or over-the-air programming, not only with our Tait radios, but also with mobile radios, for example. You still got the capability. It's through their own server, but it will use the Tait H25 standard, or I'm sorry, H25 standard across the Tait network to provide that functionality.
That's pretty much it.
Perfect. Pricing? Anybody interested? Okay. So, a lot of this, we kind of breeze through. We kind of breeze through a lot of the Tait suite. The reason it's captured here is because it's all included. The package that we put together is a fully inclusive package. The idea is that this will give you a real actual idea of how much a system would cost. Not, hey, here's a base system, but if you want that radio to actually work when you push the button, here's this license that you have to have. There's it's fully transparent. I'm happy to provide this to anyone as well. So, 14-site configuration with a 6-site simulcast zone, 8 multicast sites, with entire 10% spares equipment, so an entire spare package. We didn't talk about it, but it covers all of the components, so that if there are any failures, you have immediate swap out instead of having to pull it out, ship it back, etc. So 10% of everything we have is, or greater, is captured there. The project works and services, Project works and services that includes everything from installation to project management to procurement to training, etc. Actually, training is separate line. But the project works, that's the entire labor for the entire system. So everything. The training, that includes training for both technical users and the actual users of the system. So maintenance training as well as operational training. Spectrum management. This is an important piece too because Ray was talking about how hard it is sometimes to get spectrum. We use a firm called Easy Spectrum. All they do is acquire spectrum. That's it. That's their entire corporate focus. So we leverage them to where we can guarantee acquisition of spectrum. And that also means clean spectrum, so spectrum that's not taken in the area by interference, etc. Support and extended hardware maintenance for 5 years. So what's included in the space package of $9.5 million is 5 years worth of your support. So that means all the hardware maintenance, all the software maintenance. We can extend that all the way up to 20 years. And 20 years is important to factor into a total cost of ownership. We didn't because the industry standard is 5 years, but I'll talk to a 20-year package. Then we've got apples-to-apples comparison with, for example, the federal report that came out. Anytime you go over 10 years of maintenance, there's what's called a hardware refresh. And if you are talking to any other manufacturers and you're talking about the total cost of ownership, make sure they're capturing that hardware refresh, and that's not a separate line item. Why that's important is because servers don't last for 20 years. Routers don't last for 20 years. Technology moves at too fast of a rate. Look at your computers. Once you hit a 10-year mark on a computer, you start having slowing issues, you have other issues. That's why it's important for the computing processing functionality, everything that's not purpose-built, for example, to be exchanged roughly every 10 years if it's guaranteed by the manufacturer. So, in a hardware refresh, that replaces everything with the exception of the repeaters and passive equipment. Repeaters are purpose-built, they're designed actually for 25 to 30 year lifespan versus a server which actually commercially is less than 5 years is what the designation is for. So we included the 5 years there at 2.94, so 9.587. The total cost of ownership for 20 years, which would be adding an additional 15 years, which would include a hardware refresh, so replacement of all the infrastructure with the exception of antennas, feed lines, and repeaters themselves, and our subsystem would be $18 million for 20 years. So an entire system, worry-free, with warranty and maintenance for 20 years would be $18 million. Yes, sir?
I love seeing a column that indicates discount. Why? Why are you proposing a discount? Is it that we're meeting a threshold of services that would maintain the contract, or just curious to know?
Sure. No, so this pricing is based on a commercially available contract for public safety. NASCO, if you've heard of NASCO or HGAC, these are nationwide competitively bid procurements that all manufacturers, or any that are on it, participate in, and it's a negotiated price, and then it's awarded by whoever the contract vehicle holder is. So this is NASCO discount. Yes, sir. So in the pricing that you see, which is over here, includes the NASCO discount. Now, once we get to the subscribers, which will be user radios, that's where it becomes more subjective on discount levels. So that's where, let's say, you're buying 50 portable radios versus 500 portable radios, that's where the discount can vary. There is a standard 27% discount for Tait subscriber devices listed in NASCO, so that's your baseline. However, NASCO allows manufacturers to offer additional discounts based on quality. That's where the volume comes into play when you start looking at subscriber device price. Yes, sir?
How come the discount is actually bigger than the list price, and yet the price is $9 million? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm not seeing that. Which
the first column says the list price is $11 million.
Yes, sir. And then you got a $1.4 million discount for a $9.5 million
so there's an extra comma. Okay.
So what is the lead time? So let's say January 1st, we're like, go, let's make this happen. How long will it take?
Yeah, so let's walk through, that's a loaded question, and I'll explain why. There's multiple aspects to deployment timeline. One is this, sure, we're talking about critical design and
Yeah, no, I want to talk about lead times for products. Right?
Oh, products.
Yes, lead time for products. So we design and manufacture our own equipment, right? So it makes it a little easier for us than people that have to subcontract and chase parts from others. So what we typically do as we go through the process of doing the design and working through the details, our average is somewhere around 12 weeks from the time you place the order to the time we can start shipping material. And we try to manage that based on, our gut instinct. A lot of times we stock, we'll build. I will personally purchase equipment, have it sitting someplace on a shelf. So if we think that you're going to buy X number of subscribers, we may, what we do, we call a lean-in, we'll start manufacturing early, right? So my goal isn't to have you sitting waiting for 20 weeks. Right now, everybody knows that the world of shipping is upside down. Sometimes there's more radios sitting on tankers out in the ocean somewhere than anywhere else, right? We don't use shipping containers to ship our stuff. We put them on airplanes. So we actually charter with different airlines to put the material on an airplane that leaves on factory. So we find that to be much more consistent and easier to manage. So we'll do smaller shipments more often. And we've been able to get through the entire pandemic without having significant impacts on our shipping schedules. So that's really the best way to do it, is to control all the manufacturing. And then we do a little bit of pre-planning with the expectation of what your delivery dates will be. And then we'll probably do a bunch of lean-ins and start building that stuff before it's actually purchased.
Thank you. There's another, I'll continue one second. There's another aspect to when you're talking about January 1, let's go, that leads up to not only the product delivery itself. There's part of our project management is to do a due diligence or a detailed design review. There's multiple quality gates that occur throughout an implementation that make sure that, one, we're meeting the expectations, but we're also managing the expectations. So the initial roughly 2 months period, let's say January 1, Palm Beach County 1 says, hey, let's go, let's do this exactly as you're proposing today. What we would do is we'd go through site surveys, we'd go through detailed information, we would know down to an inch of how much line is required, and then we would build basically an as-built package. That package would then be presented to all of the key stakeholders, and those key stakeholders are like, oh, I didn't realize this, so let's change that, or yep, that's perfect, or I didn't realize this functionality was available, let's change it to this. That's why we have these design dates to make sure that we're managing and meeting expectations at every stage. So we won't procure equipment, except for stuff that is long lead items, like antennas or something like that, that won't change based on the final design. We'll go ahead and order those, as Kevin said, as a risk order ahead of time, and as we progress on through the design. So there's multiple aspects to when will the system be usable if we start tomorrow, but we have all the ways in place to manage it.
So there's a very detailed schedule that needs to put together. So you assign a dedicated project manager. That project manager then manages that schedule. That schedule includes everything from a kickoff meeting all the way through the implementation of every site, the equipment when it needs to be on site, whether it's antennas, cabling. They manage the entire project, and then there's engineers that actually participate as we go through the process to make sure that everything we said we were going to do is getting done. Anything that needs to be reconsidered, reevaluated, gets assessed. So it's a very detailed process, but we will provide that schedule at the kickoff meeting and collaborate on all those dates, and that sets when things are going to start getting ordered, because we have to do the detailed design, we have to nail down all the specifics, then we'll plan when that schedule starts, and a lot of times we'll start hedging our bets, because there are things like Cisco routers. Right now, a Cisco router for a network, they're out. Some of them, I think the last I heard, would probably have 48 weeks, over a year in many cases, to get Cisco equipment. So if you know those things are taking a long time, those are the things we're going to order up front to make sure that we've got ample stock.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I got it.
Well, we can go here first and come back to you. Yes,
Yeah, so is your equipment coming from China?
No.
Where's it come from?
New Zealand is the primary
okay.
location.
And also, I was going to ask you on your towers, is that a union outfit or is it non-union?
ComSouth is non-union, private union.
Oh, that's not good.
Well, we can work with unions too. I mean, we can work with anyone in Oregon and Washington, specifically in the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of requirements for wage, etc. It comes down to the procurement policy in the local areas that we abide to. So in other words, procurement says that there's a specific quantity of maybe with minority-owned business or women-owned business that has to be met within the project. Then we would work with local to find who would provide that functionality. A lot of times we'll go out to bid locally. If the stroke falls on us, we'll go out to bid locally. The idea is we want to keep as much revenue within the county as possible, anywhere we can.
Thanks.
Sure. Chief had a question in front of me.
So we saw the price point and everything like that. So over the 15 to 20 years is the difference between Tait and Motorola. What do you do different?
Over
the 15 to 20 years, what do you offer that Motorola can't, or what are the differences?
Yeah, that's a subjective as to who's a better girlfriend. At the end of the day, P25 technology is the standard. Physics are physics. So any manufacturer you go with is going to be better than you have today, just by default. So it comes down to, one, who do you want to spend your relationship with? And I'd like to think it's safe for a couple of reasons. One, we don't necessarily answer to the profitability of your shareholders. A lot of our decisions based on longevity of the corporate name. So we make a lot of decisions based on the reference accounts rather than on what's going to drive the next profit. That, in my opinion, makes us a better quality than someone like Lola who has to report earnings report. Other aspects is we are still small when you look at the comparison of land mobile rating market share. That means that every single account that we have clients in, every partner that we have, has to be referenceable. They have to say positive things about us in order for us to grow. We can't go pull a Rolodex and say, well, these 75% of customers aren't happy, so we're only going to use this 25% as references for future opportunities. We don't have that luxury, nor do we want that luxury. We want to have partners that are with us and make sure everybody's happy to take. Leveraging that as the namesake to continue growing. Other manufacturers, not to call out any names, but don't necessarily follow those same guidelines. They look at, okay, I'm going to respond to where the most profit is, and that's where I'll put the focus. So for Columbia County, and it's also an aspect of regional systems like Washington County system, others. What's your population density? What value are you providing to them into that network? Are you going to be the top priority, or are they going to take care of themselves first and then you keep the straps out? So I hope that answers your question without me slandering you.
No, I had the form more of an answer than more than the presentation, so I guess you know we'll take the topic.
Okay. All right, that's easy.
All right, well, I'll try to keep it quick. So I know the Vista home site isn't there, I mean, the infrastructure is pretty sure it is, but in my understanding, there's 3 other sites that are not built yet? Are these all sites that are all there, ready to go, basically?
Not all the sites are there ready to go. Vista is obviously one of the major issues that we have to not only redo the shelter infrastructure that's there, but I think power. I don't think there's power existing that's ran out there, so we have to figure that out in the process.
There is to be energized and vandalized.
Well, if we can fix the vandalized part of the energized, you can fix that. Right. Problem solved. So we're saving money already. Okay. So yeah, we've got a site list. I have to go through that site list. I just don't have it memorized. I have to see which sites are existing infrastructure sites versus what would be retrofit locations. Any other questions here on the parts of yes, ma'am?
Well, I'm just obviously we have to go for a bond, or I think the better option is grants. And we work with other communities like ours, and we work with them on grants.
Yes,
grants.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
you do have someone on staff that can help with that?
We do. Well, we don't have a dedicated person toward grants, but we work with a number of different grant agencies. And I would actually refer you to local municipalities that also do this. I mentioned earlier in my history, I worked at Deschutes County 911 for a fair amount of time. In Deschutes County, Kenna, who was our office manager, she wears multiple hats. She's also a grant writer and did a phenomenal job of getting multiple grants for Deschutes County 911. But leveraging people like that are applying for every different grant mechanism that's local is great. Apronina, I don't know if you're involved with Apronina at all. Apronina are organizations, public safety communications organizations that are focused on either the dispatch side of the house or the radio side of the house. Both of those organizations have meetings monthly and then quarterly at a regional basis. And I believe they used to have a yearly meeting in South Shannon that lasted for 3 days where they actually bring grant offerers in to explain the grant process, how how to better position for grants, how to write grants. But again, we as a manufacturer also partner with grant writers to help customers to get to write specifically. But think of a grant too, there's a ton of grants out there that are available. It's determining which ones are going to be the best thing for you to focus on. And in order to pursue those, what you're showing that says that I'm committed and how you write your grant will a lot of times decide whether you get it over someone else or not.
I know the schools have opportunities right now. They don't necessarily have grant writers, but they have opportunities to help some of the federal monies for school safety.
Sure.
So that might be an avenue for us.
Absolutely.
As a community.
Absolutely. And we would work with you to apply for those grants. And to help, specifically help you with the verbiage side when you submit.
Is there still ARP money available? The American, I know a lot of the counties we work with across the country are also getting and have access to ARP money.
ARP is already going. Not only county. Sorry to not be ARPA is American Relief Protection. I don't remember exactly what it stands for. It was the second unfunded one that came in. It was given to the states and then also allocated to counties and cities. But I believe it's already been appropriated for the county. Bonding is probably the best mechanism from a capital purchase perspective. And even going out to bond, you can still get grants. As well as there's triple Bs or public-private partnerships where we will actually, at a pretty aggressive rate, finance a solution for 7, 10, 15 years to where you're getting a monthly expenditure. And with it being financed that way, it's still, you're able to leverage bonds at the capital investment side, or you could levy within your base compression levy, so I would be hesitant to go too far on topics.
So is Tait holding the longevity of the project in the way of like training personnel? Because you have a whole bunch of agencies that are now going to be working together, or is it an added cost of the staffing within one of the agencies?
You're talking about refresh training?
No, I'm talking about, like, say, whether it's ECOM or NIOM or the county itself, who's going to hold it and pass on user fees, to the different agencies that are now working together.
Well, our system doesn't leverage user fees. That would be more of a decision on Columbia County 911. For example, if they wanted to open it up, say, Columbia County 911 says we're going to buy this whole thing.
Right, so historically, what are you seeing with the other counties? Are they actually now having to pay, are we having to staff somebody? Or are they relying on just the agency to pick that up and know how to do it?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So training new users coming on, new agencies that don't still listen.
No, like, so collaboratively, all of our, say, the PDs and the fire and county, DCOM, traditionally have not worked together. So who's bringing them together and going to maintain that?
Gotcha. Okay, now I understand the question. This is more of a process operation of the question. We have a lot of experience with rental radio systems across the globe, obviously, so we have a lot of lessons learned that we will provide to the county. Ultimately, it's up to the county for specific operations to determine how you communicate between yourselves, whether it's fire and police, mutual aid channels, etc. In our services we provide, one of those is a fleet map session. That fleet map is basically saying who out of these 1,000 people could possibly need to talk together, and then basically draw a map. This person could talk to this person in this situation, this person talk to this person in this situation, and then you use that to build tall groups. Now these tall groups then get organized in a fashion to where it's efficient within your capacity that you're not, everybody's not talking one-to-one like a cell phone. They're able to use groups efficiently, and then that's going to define the mutual aid channels where police and fire talk, where MBA situation, all the way down to X amount of degree. Right? So let's say in Columbia County, what happens if there's 5 major MBAs that are blocking traffic all at one time? Then you have operational channels. Now, you might say that happens once every 30 years, so we don't really need to design for 5, we need to design for 3, but we will provide that support to the county to make those decisions, and we will coach you in the decision-making process. All of that would occur long before the system's actually deployed and used. And then users will be trained based on that configuration, those different operational practices, at the time of user training. Did that answer your question?
No, I'm still seeing that it would be another budgeted item at the county
So that's not necessarily a system, that's an operational practice. Typically, a system administrator provides that functionality, whether the county uses a system administrator or wants to use, like, for example, we have a local service partner right here in the Portland area that Communications Northwest, they provide that functionality to users. We also offer an option for a full-time system administrator. That full-time system administrator will be a Tait badged employee that would, I guess it would work from their house here, local, or they could come into Columbia County number 1 and have an office, whatever that situation looks like. But they would be managing all of the system. That also includes the operational practices.
They would also ask who manages today, the systems today.
Which system? PUD's got their own system, County Road has their own system, Columbia County 911 has their system, the schools have their own system, so there's half a dozen or so different radio systems
When you
there.
sell a system, you can partition it however you want. So you can have multiple system admins, you can have multiple system managers, multiple people that are in charge of their employees, or you can consolidate it and have, one manager and then you want to use that. That is really, the freedom is up to you and how you want it, and we can provide guidance for that. We provide examples of how other customers have done it. We can even provide that service if you wanted it. But it really, the freedom stands with the whole community.
It's part of your planning process too, because no matter what radio system you like to go with, you're going to have the same issue. And so you have to address, you have to think through that planning process of how, A, manage the system, and B, who does training. Right? Is it a trainer where you have somebody who is the subject matter expert, trainer? I will share with you that TriMet is one that we have on-site services where we have a Tait badge employee who's on staff that basically maintains TriMet radio infrastructure. That's all he does, is maintain the radio. Any changes, administrative reporting, everything is done by that individual.
Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate the question and answer real quick for everyone that's in the virtual meetings. And the question, which I failed to understand multiple times, was with this new system configuration that has multiple agencies that have never had interoperable communication capability before, who's going to manage their communications, the training, the know-how of how that operational characteristic will happen? And the answer is multifaceted. Ray, actually, the best answer is it's up to the county to decide, or up to all of the users that are on the system to decide how they want to operate. It can be partitioned to where the existing operations that are in place are maintained, to where police manages police operations, fire manages fire, utilities manage utilities. That's fine to be partitioned down that way. Or you can have a singular system administrator that provides the communication interoperable capabilities of all users and manage their fleets for them. All right, any other questions here? Any more pricing questions? All right, go past it. 3, 2, okay. All right, I appreciate everybody being patient through this presentation. I know it's a lot of information and a lot of time, so I'm going to move pretty quick. Again, our infrastructure, I talked at the very beginning about how we decouple the infrastructure from subscribers. It's really two different parts. The infrastructure aspect we designed specifically to be agnostic to the subscriber side. So in other words, we follow the TSP 88 standards to where we give the power of choice to the users to determine what the best subscriber radio is for them. Some might like Motorola, some might like Harris, some might like Kenwood, some might like Tait. That's up to you to make that decision on what you want from the subscriber fleet. Again, there's original equipment manufacturer with a full portfolio, including subscriber devices. So I'll just touch on a couple of them real quick. We just launched our TP9800 multi-band radio. It is the smallest, which is important for those that are duty belts, as they can attest. It is the smallest and lightest weight portable radio, multi-band portable radio on the market. It also has improved receive sensitivity over the TSP88 standard, so that means that the coverage is actually a better fit than what we're advertising. So that is a TP98 multi-band. I'll talk about pricing in just a second too. But we have a full portfolio. Specifically within the Fusion 5 portfolio, we have the TB9400, TB9600, and TB9800. Again, the colors don't matter. We can whatever colors you want. We have an entire color palette to choose from. We want color radios. I've got some pricing identified here for the radios. So the list, or I'm sorry, the national pricing for the TP9400 is $3,700. It's a single band radio. That includes the battery, that includes the radio, that includes the antenna, that includes the speaker microphone, and it includes the rear warranty. So that is, and all the licensing. Sorry, licensing equates to roughly 70% of the cost of the radio based on how it's configured. Why that's important to look at apples-to-apples comparison of other manufactured devices to capture costs is you have to have the same software configuration in those radios to actually get an accurate depiction of what the cost is from an apples-to-apples comparison. So this pricing includes 325 phase 1 operation, 325 phase 2 operation, AES multi-key encryption. So those are your most expensive software pieces.
And these are national prices?
This is a national price, yes sir. So again, based on volume, it's where we get into the discussion of additional discount. So TP9600, 3750, not too big of a difference there. Our TP9800 can be bought as a single band or a tri-band radio. Our single band is 4,233, and then the dual band and multi-band configuration is 4,790. Again, that's not just the radio, it's radio with all the software configuration as well as a speaker mic. It also includes over-the-air programming, which is another software configuration, as well as over-the-air reading, which is another software configuration. So when you look at apples comparison, the software is an important aspect to look at to make sure that everybody is providing the same digital. Okay, the reason I showed the TP94, 96, and 9800 radio is because they all use the same accessories. So when you look at a fleet, an 800, potentially 800 user fleet, the consistency of accessories is pretty important for a couple of reasons. One is volume buying power of accessories. Two is standardization to where training aspects. And then three is replacement capability. So if you have all of the same accessories, for example, then you can replace a singular speaker mic with somebody all tendencies on wall spine. It doesn't matter whether they have a TP9400, 9600, 9800, they all use the same accessories. Same with chargers, which is also very important aspect. Okay, the mobile, I keep on clicking on this diagram. The mobile, this is our TM9800 mobile here. There we go. So single band configuration for a TM9800, which is a single band with a multi-band, it's the same form factor. So $4,130 for the single band, $4,480 for the dual band. So why dual band? We're proposing a 7,800 megahertz system. The neighboring counties are 7,800 megahertz. So why dual band? Well, because there are other systems. Plus fire, historically, anybody fire here, please correct me, a lot of them use VHF or simplex on-scene situations, fire. And that's pretty much the standard across really most of the western states, California, Oregon, Washington. So that multi-band configuration would provide benefit there for simplex operation. Now, we talked about the coverage characteristics of VHF 700. In the county, 700, in my opinion, is the best bang for the buck because of the challenges with the terrain. However, in simplex operation, VHF, simplex means radio to radio, where it's not hitting the tower, it's bypassing the tower. So it's just line of sight between two users or multiple users. That simplex operation, VHF provides more characteristics than 700. So that's where the multi-band configuration specifically require users would provide value for on-scene response. But from dispatch perspective, the 700 megahertz would provide better coverage. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
How long would it take for the equipment to be installed and the conversion to the new system? How long would 911 be working with that conversion?
Yeah, there's different cutover methodologies to determine what's going to be the least impactful, and part of that decision-making process is on tower site availability. So let's just say at a tower, as long as there's room for both systems to be up at the same time, then as soon as the system's deployed and training's conducted, we can cut over quickly, right? So typically when you do a cutover from an old system to a new system, we train, we do it in a staggered format. So you might transition one shift at a time, for example. let them burn it in for a week or 2 weeks after the system's fully accepted. That way there's not any major user issues, operational issues, you're able to identify that before you move everybody over. Typically, a system this size, assuming that there's the capability to run both systems in parallel, which there should be since we're completely different frequency bands, the entire transition from when you start transitioning users to the finalizing transition users is roughly 90 days. But again, that's part of the federal methodology, and that would be a mutually discussed and agreed upon configuration between all of the users of the system as well as the manufacturer providing that kind of support.
So the subscriber units that you're showing us, both the handheld and the mobiles, are on top of the quote that you...
Correct. Yeah, I did not include that in the...
So just looking at the information that was gathered through the survey, it's another 3 million in handhelds and another 2.5 million in mobiles.
How many users is that? How many mobile radios? Not a question of math. It absolutely could be.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but it says on this list here, let's see, 474 plus 362. So I did single band and dual band, so that's 800 radios there, handheld. And 350 for single band mobiles and 215 for dual band. Comes out to about $5 million more for the subscriber. Okay.
So you know your math.
Just want to make clear.
Sure.
The 19 million includes the...
Correct. Yep, the subscriber license and required etc. And will be manufactured unless they bundle it all together. And again, NASPO or commercially available contracts give us the ability to offer additional discount on the subscriber license. So if, for example, all of the radios you've done pre-purchase from Tait, then they do considerable discounts on these.
Yeah, that's right. I'm assuming that all Tait. Right. It could be different.
It could be.
I'm just doing it with math. I just wanted to make it clear.
Nope, yeah, you're absolutely right. So the pricing that I showed earlier is infrastructure pricing. The subscriber license, decoupled from that, is the separate expense. But you can extrapolate roughly from a budget perspective based on the numbers that I provided. Okay, digital convergence. I can read through this real quick. The digital convergence, what that means is basically technologies are changing, and there's multiple technologies. We talked about cellular technology, commercially cellular technology, and the interoperable communications there. Well, the capabilities of having that cellular function, using that cellular backhaul to talk across a P25 radio network is here today. We leverage a company that does nothing but it's called EPTT, or electronic PTT, cellular PTT functionality on an app on your phone that can talk over the radio system in a secure manner. ESChat is a partner that provides that functionality. It makes a lot of sense to where you don't have to buy extra radios at $4,000 a pop. For example, admin users that might not necessarily need that mission critical radio but have a cell phone with them all times. All they have to do is just press an app on their cell phone and then they're able to communicate both directions across the radio system. So for a block of 150 users, which again is just an app that you download on your phone, and then there's an on-premise server that manages all of the security aspects of allowing the commercial network access into infrastructure through 500 is roughly $160,000.
Is that annual or is that?
Nope, it's a one-time fee.
Okay. So there's no annual and monthly fees related to that?
I don't believe ESChat charges any fees. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rich. Does ESChat charge any monthly or annual fees? Now the on-premise solution.
The charges through us.
I'm sorry? It is subscription. Okay, so that you know what the terms of that? I can get that information now on the terms of the subscription.
Can we have that before 12 months presentation?
Okay, I'll make a call tomorrow. Okay, console dispatch options. So in our proposed solution, there are two different options for consoles. One being Aptec, another being Intertalk. Again, we can also, if there was a desire for Zetron, we can provide an option for Zetron, which all of those are P25 console providers. Aptec South has been around. In fact, Kevin worked at Aptec for a number of years. Aptec did a great product. They were one of the first true IP-based console manufacturers out there. They were purchased by Motorola 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
3 years.
3 years ago. Since then, there hasn't been any future development planning on the Aptec model. So Aptec is still an option. They're owned by Motorola, so Motorola controls the future of Aptec. So I don't know what that means. There is a little uncertainty associated with that. But again, they provide a great Aptec solution, IP-based dispatch console system. So that is an option. Intertalk is a standalone console manufacturer that is wholly owned and provides nothing but dispatch functionality. And that's the second operator we include in pricing structure as well. Both of them are true IP-based console systems, so they're the latest and greatest as far as technology goes. They include the option is for 6 positions, so it's 6 dispatch center. Both companies also offer light models or laptop or tablet versions for utility. For example, if you had a utility operator that was dispatching, they could be evaluated or put in one position. Again, the functionality of this all being logical network, all IP-based, is we could have one position 100 miles away from the rest of the system, as long as they have network connectivity, it's still operating the system. And they can be partitioned to where, if there was a disparate dispatch system, PD can only dispatch PD, fire can only dispatch fire, public works can only dispatch public works, and not have access to the others. It's completely within the systems. Okay, so that concludes our presentation. I'm not going to go into too much detail. Kevin did a great job of explaining who Tait is, as well as his executive commitment as the president of the company to the county 911, as well as all the user agencies within the county. I want to thank you all for your time. I know that it was a very long presentation, so I appreciate your attention and great questions. My card is back on the table. If anybody has any questions following up, feel free to reach out to me and ask. I'm happy to answer them on behalf of Tait or just on behalf of the industry itself. So thank you all.
Thank you.